What if the stones of the past could still speak? What secrets would they tell us about lost civilizations and forgotten worlds? Welcome to Unearthed Secrets, the channel where we uncover history's greatest mysteries. Please subscribe to our channel, give this video a like, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now, let's begin. The Lion Hunt reliefs, beneath the silent halls of ancient palaces, where stone still remembers the weight of kings and the echo of footsteps long vanished. There lies a carved story unlike any other. It is not written in ink, nor sung in epic verse, but etched into slabs of gypsum and alabaster, the Lion Hunt reliefs of Assyria. These vast, sweeping murals, painstakingly chiseled nearly 3,000 years ago, capture not only the ferocity of lions but the grandeur and might of kings who believed themselves chosen by the gods to stand above all creatures of the earth. To wander slowly along these reliefs, as if tracing one's hand across their patient, weathered lines, is to move between two worlds, the real and the symbolic, the hunt and the ceremony, the predator and the king. The lions, their muscles rippling in stone, are shown with teeth bared, claws extended, leaping, falling, writhing, dying. The kings, solemn yet fierce, are depicted with bows drawn, spears thrust, chariots rolling forward with relentless momentum. Between them, a drama unfolds, not simply a hunt, but a ritual demonstration of power, of control, of cosmic balance. Close your eyes for a moment, and imagine yourself within the halls of Nineveh or Nimrud, the capitals of Assyrian might. The palace walls towered high, painted, gleaming, alive with the torchlight of braziers and the shuffle of guards. Courtiers moved in hushed tones, priests whispered prayers, scribes carried their clay tablets, and there, stretching across the walls in room after room, the reliefs told their story, a story meant to be read not with words but with awe. The king hunts lions. He must, because lions are chaos, lions are wilderness, lions are the unbounded threat to order. By conquering them, the king proves not only his courage, but his divine sanction. Each arrow loosed into the chest of a lion, each spear driven through its mane, each beast collapsing to the ground, was more than blood and bone. It was proof that the gods had placed the king above nature, above danger, above the very earth itself. The reliefs were carved during the reigns of kings like Ashurnasirpal II and Ashurbanipal, rulers whose names carried weight like thunder. Ashurbanipal, in particular, loved the hunt, and the reliefs from his palace at Nineveh are among the most vivid. Picture them, long, sweeping panels, lions released from cages to charge at the royal chariot, their eyes wide, their jaws stretched in roars forever frozen. Soldiers assist, dogs chase, horses rear, and through it all the king stands at the center, steady, unshaken, the axis around which the world turns. But listen closer, and there is another story beneath. For while the reliefs show the triumph of man over beast, they also capture something more poignant. The lions are carved with astonishing sensitivity. Their muscles flex as they leap, their faces twist in agony as arrows pierce their sides. One lion staggers forward with arrows bristling from its body, its strength fading yet its spirit unbroken. Another claws at the ground, dragging itself forward even as life leaves it. These details speak of artists who observed lions closely, who knew their forms, their power, their suffering. There is tragedy here, carved into the triumph. It is a paradox, propaganda for kings yet empathy for lions. The Assyrian sculptors may have served their rulers, but they also gave voice to the animals. In the stillness of the stone, you can hear both the roar of the lion and the command of the king. Now imagine standing before these reliefs when they were new, the stone bright, the carvings sharp, perhaps even painted with color that time has since erased. The king, robed and crowned, would have walked past them with visitors, with envoys from distant lands, with subjects come to bow. Each visitor would look upon the scenes and understand at once, this was no mere hunter. This was the guardian of the realm, the chosen of the gods, the one who held back the chaos of nature and secured the order of civilization. For in Assyrian thought, the lion was more than an animal. It was a symbol of untamed wilderness, of destructive forces lurking beyond the walls of the city. To kill the lion was to establish dominion not only over the beast but over the wild itself. The reliefs, then, were not decorations but statements, silent proclamations of supremacy. The king hunts, and so the kingdom endures. Step back further into time, into the preparation of such hunts. These were no casual affairs. Lions were captured alive, kept in cages, brought into controlled arenas where the king might demonstrate his skill. Priests blessed the event. Soldiers stood ready, chariots and horses were adorned, trumpets may have sounded. This was ritual as much as it was spectacle, and for the king it was also dangerous. A lion, even wounded, could kill with one swipe of its paw. The reliefs remind us that these were not harmless displays. The king's courage was tested, his life was placed on the line, and his victory, when achieved, was all the more glorious. Imagine the tension of such a moment. The cage door creaks open. A lion, confused, furious, emerges into the arena. The king raises his bow. The air is thick with silence. Then a roar, a charge, the twang of bowstring, the whistle of arrows. The beast falls, and the crowd erupts in relief and praise. The priests declare that the gods are pleased, and the lion, in its death, becomes part of the king's eternal glory. All of this lives on in the stone. You can follow the sequence of events as though watching a film frame by frame. The release of lions, their rush forward, their struggle, their defeat. Horses surge forward, wheels of chariots spin, soldiers shout commands, arrows fly, and in every scene the king is calm, unwavering, unassailable. The artistry is remarkable. Look closely at the detail, the curve of a lion's mane, the veins carved into its body, the expression in its eyes. Look at the musculature of horses, the fold of garments, the precision of weapons. This was art in service of power, but it was also art for art's sake, a testament to the skill of Assyrian craftsmen who could make stone breathe. Centuries later, when these reliefs were rediscovered, scholars and travelers stood astonished. Here was a window into a world of ritual and majesty, of brutality and symbolism, of human ambition and animal nobility. Today, many of the reliefs are displayed in museums, such as the British Museum, where visitors walk past them slowly, hushed, almost reverent, as though in the presence of something more than history. And indeed, they are more than history. They are a meditation on power, mortality, and the fragile balance between humans and nature. For though the king triumphs in stone, it was the lions who endured in spirit. Long after Assyria fell, long after its palaces crumbled, long after the names of kings were forgotten by most, the image of the lion remains vivid, immediate, eternal. Let yourself linger here, in this thought. The reliefs, carved to glorify kings, now often move us most because of the lions. The kings claimed victory, but the lions claimed immortality. Their suffering, their defiance, their roaring silence carved into the walls, these reach across millennia and stir something deep within us. Close your eyes once more, and walk again through the palace halls. The torches flicker, the stone walls rise, the reliefs surround you. Lions leap, lions fall, kings stand resolute, arrows fly, chariots thunder. The drama is endless, repeating itself again and again in silent eternity. But as you walk, let the noise fade, let the tension dissolve. Hear only the quiet, the hush of centuries, the stillness of stone, the calm after the hunt. The lion hunt reliefs are not only records of Assyrian glory, they are also reminders of how humans have always sought to define themselves against nature, how we have told stories of triumph and control, and how, even in victory, we remain haunted by the nobility of what we destroy. And so tonight, as you drift into rest, let the reliefs become your dreamscape. See the lions not as defeated, but as eternal, their roars echoing softly, not in rage but in memory. The kings too fade into shadows, their crowns heavy, their victories fleeting, but the stone endures, and in its quiet endurance lies a lesson, that all power passes, all hunts end, and all creatures, king or lion, return to silence. Let that silence carry you now, gentle and unbroken, into sleep. The tumulus of Karajaka. The tumulus of Karajaka, resting beneath the shifting skies of northwestern Iran, is not a place that draws the footsteps of hurried travelers. It is not a landmark that one stumbles across while passing through the winding valleys of Kurdistan or the high plains that stretch between Hamadan and Kermanshah. Instead, it is a silent mound, a rise in the earth that does not immediately reveal its age, nor the weight of the centuries gathered upon it. Yet those who have walked its slopes, archaeologists and villagers alike, have spoken of a presence, as though the land itself remembers something older than memory, something buried beneath soil and stone. The tumulus is thought to belong to the Medes, that shadowy people of the first millennium BCE, who stood between the Assyrians to the west and the Persians to the east. The Medes were known to the Greeks, and to Herodotus, who spoke of their kings, their councils, and their eventual union with the Persians under Cyrus the Great. But the Medes left little in the way of inscriptions, no grand stone monuments like their successors. Instead, they left traces, whispers, fragments of pottery, foundations of fortresses, and burial mounds like Karajaka. To stand before the tumulus is to stand before silence, to confront the absent voice of a civilization that is known more from the words of its enemies and neighbors than from its own. The mound itself rises gently from the surrounding landscape. To the untrained eye, it could be mistaken for a natural hill, shaped by erosion and time. But its curves are too regular, its presence too deliberate. The stones that scatter its surface are not random. They are the remnants of a construction, a layering of soil and rock piled up by human hands. Beneath its surface lies a chamber, or perhaps several, carved or built for the dead. Such tumuli are found throughout the ancient world, from the barrows of northern Europe to the kurgans of the Eurasian steppe. They are markers of status, of reverence, of memory. They are monuments not just to individuals, but to the societies that raised them. When the winds pass across Karajaka, They whisper through grasses that have grown upon it for centuries. In the spring, wildflowers dot its slopes, small bursts of color among the green. In winter, snow softens its shape, making it seem almost a natural part of the land again. Yet beneath that seasonal cycle lies constancy. The tomb remains. The burial chamber waits, as it has waited for more than 2.5 millennia. Archaeologists who have studied the tumulus suggest that it dates to the early 1st millennium BCE, perhaps the 7th or 6th century. This was a time when the Medes were rising, when they forged alliances, when they fought against Assyrian domination, when their kings gathered power in Ecbatana, the great city said to have 7 concentric walls, each painted a different color. The tumulus may have held one of those kings, or a noble, or a warrior of renown. It may have been a place where treasures were laid down, objects meant to accompany the dead into whatever afterlife the Medes envisioned. Gold, weapons, jewelry, vessels, ornaments, such things have been found in other mounds across the region, tantalizing glimpses of wealth and artistry. But the tumulus of Karajaka is more than the possibility of treasure. It is a story of ritual. To bury someone in such a way required planning, labor, and belief. Earth had to be gathered and raised. Stone chambers constructed. Mourners would have come, bearing offerings, speaking words that no one alive remembers. Fires may have burned. Animals may have been sacrificed. Songs may have been sung in a language that has not survived, a tongue that only flickers in the place names and borrowed words of later peoples. For the Medes, this burial was not just the interment of a body, it was an act of binding memory to the land, of anchoring their dead in a mound that would rise above the plain, visible to all who passed. Imagine approaching the tumulus in the days of its creation. The land would have been alive with movement, workers carrying baskets of soil, teams of men dragging stones, overseers directing the labor. Priests, perhaps clad in ritual garments, overseeing the sacred rites. At the heart of it all, the burial chamber, dark and solemn, awaiting the body of the one who would be entombed there. The corpse, prepared with care, adorned with the objects that defined rank and identity. A sword, if a warrior. A diadem, if a ruler. Ornaments of gold, if wealth was to accompany the soul. These things were not placed casually. They were arranged with meaning, with intention, with symbolism that is now lost to us. As the chamber was sealed, the mourners must have gathered above it. Earth began to fall, covering the stones, hiding the chamber beneath layers of soil. The mound grew, slowly at first, then rising higher and higher. To those watching, it was more than construction, it was transformation. The body was passing from the world of the living to the world of the dead, from visibility to invisibility, from presence to memory. When at last the mound stood completed, it marked that transformation in the most visible way possible. From then on, anyone who saw the mound would know, here lies one who mattered. Here lies one whose death demanded remembrance. Centuries passed. The Medes themselves faded from history, absorbed into the Persian Empire. Their names grew faint. Their language dissolved. But the mound remained. Villagers in later centuries may not have known who lay beneath it, but they would have sensed its significance. Such mounds often attract stories. Some say they hold kings. Others imagine giants, or spirits, or jinn. Some avoid them out of respect or fear, while others dig into them, seeking treasure. Karajaka, like other tumuli, would have gathered such whispers, such tales, weaving them into the fabric of local memory. Today, archaeologists approach with tools and theories. They measure the slope, analyze the soil, map the stones. They compare with other sites across Iran, across Anatolia, across Central Asia. They ask what the tumulus reveals about the Medes, about their beliefs, about their practices. Each fragment of pottery, each shard of bone, each discoloration in the soil is a clue, a piece of a puzzle that may never be fully solved. For the Medes did not leave us their own words. They left us only these silent mounds, these remnants of stone and soil. Yet there is something fitting about that silence. For a burial mound is meant to be silent. It is meant to conceal, to protect, to keep the dead undisturbed. To stand upon Karajaka is to sense that stillness, that quiet presence beneath your feet. You know that something lies there, but it does not announce itself. It waits, as it has always waited. The tumulus also invites reflection on the nature of memory itself. How much do we remember of the Medes? A handful of names, a few alliances, a role in the great narrative of empires. But the mound remembers more. It remembers the moment of burial, the hands that placed the stones, the voices that sang the laments. It remembers the tears shed, the fires lit, the footsteps of mourners. All of that is absorbed into its very being, even if no human remembers. As the evening falls on Karajaka, shadows lengthen across its slopes. The wind grows cooler, the mound seems to settle into itself, becoming once again part of the earth. It is easy to imagine that the spirits of the Medes linger here, not in any fearful sense, but as a presence, as an echo of lives long past. They are not gone, they are here, in the soil, in the stones, in the silence. The tumulus thus stands as both a monument and a question. It tells us that the Medes honored their dead with great care, that they believed in the power of burial, that they sought to preserve memory through earth and stone. But it also asks us, what else do you wish to know? What stories will never be told? What songs are forever lost? And what, perhaps, still lingers, waiting for someone to listen in the right way? If one sits quietly upon the slope of Karajaka, allowing the wind to move through the grass, allowing the silence to deepen, one may begin to hear something. Not words, not voices, but a rhythm, a cadence, the slow heartbeat of the earth remembering. And in that moment, the Medes do not seem so distant. They are here, still, beneath the mound, resting, remembered not by history books or chronicles, but by the very land itself. The Ain Dara Temple. Far to the northwest of modern Syria, where hills rise gently above the Orontes River Valley, there once stood a temple so enigmatic that even centuries of study have not fully explained it. Among crumbled basalt walls and weathered limestone steps, the ruins of the Ain Dara Temple whisper an ancient story that is half known and half imagined. What lingers most strikingly are not only the carved reliefs of lions and sphinxes, or the traces of monumental architecture, but the enormous footprints carved directly into the very threshold of the sanctuary. They are so large that no human could ever have filled them. Each one measures nearly a meter long, as if left behind by some forgotten god striding into their dwelling. Tonight, as you listen, we will wander slowly through these ruins, piece by piece, as though following those giant footprints ourselves. The temple itself was constructed around 1300 BCE, in the Late Bronze Age, and continued to be used into the Iron Age. Its builders belonged to the Aramaean and Neo-Hittite cultures that flourished in this region after the collapse of the Great Bronze Age empires. The sanctuary was dedicated, some believe, to the goddess Ishtar, though others suggest it was built for Hadad, the storm god, or for a more local and unnamed divinity whose worship has otherwise faded away. Archaeology cannot answer with certainty, and so the temple rests in a twilight between knowledge and mystery. When approaching the site, the first impression is of scale. The foundations stretch nearly 60 meters long, built in alignment with the rising sun. The salt blocks weigh several tons each, fitted into walls and terraces. At the entryway, guardian lions and sphinxes were carved into stone, their bodies stylized with elaborate patterns, their faces fierce yet strangely protective. Visitors entering the sanctuary would have passed between these mythic creatures, as if moving from the ordinary world into a realm that belonged to gods alone. But the most famous detail greets you at the very beginning. Just before the threshold, carved into the basalt pavement, lies a footprint nearly a meter long. Then a second one, carved a few meters deeper inside. A third appears near the innermost sanctuary. The path they mark is deliberate, as if representing the literal steps of a being of unimaginable stature, first arriving, then striding deeper, and finally entering the most sacred chamber. Archaeologists have debated their meaning. Were they symbolic, showing the invisible presence of the god as it entered the temple? Were they meant to intimidate worshippers, reminding mortals of their own smallness compared to the divine? Or were they part of a ritual procession, guiding pilgrims along the same path their deity was thought to walk? To stand before them, even today, is unsettling. The scale dwarfs the human body. Each toe is clearly marked, each arch and heel shaped with intention, though not with naturalistic precision. These were not casual decorations, nor playful exaggerations. They were deliberate signs carved where worshippers could not ignore them. Imagine approaching this temple thousands of years ago. The air thick with the smoke of incense, the sound of drums and flutes rising, and before you these vast footprints leading inside. Every step you took, you would be reminded that you followed where gods themselves had gone. The temple's architecture deepens the mystery. Its layout closely resembles that of Solomon's temple in Jerusalem, though Ain Dara predates it by several centuries. Both structures have a three-part design: an outer courtyard, a main hall, and an inner sanctuary. In Ain Dara's case, the outer portico was flanked by sphinxes and lions, symbols of protection and power. The hall beyond stretched long and high, its basalt walls inlaid with reliefs of mythical beings, winged creatures, lions, mountain gods, while the floor was paved with carefully cut stone slabs. Finally, at the far end stood the inner sanctuary, the Holy of Holies, where only priests could enter, and where the deity's image or presence was believed to dwell. The resemblance to Solomon's temple has fueled endless speculation. Could Ain Dara have served as an architectural inspiration? The Bible describes the Temple of Solomon as massive, gilded, and filled with carved lions and cherubim. Details echoed uncannily at Ain Dara. Some scholars suggest that Ain Dara is part of a broader regional tradition of temple building, of which Solomon's sanctuary was just one example. Yet others whisper that biblical scribes, aware of Ain Dara and places like it, incorporated details into their own sacred stories. Whatever the connection, the parallel is striking and adds to the aura of mystery surrounding Ain Dara's purpose. Walking around the ruins today, you see lions carved in profile, their paws raised as if prowling. Sphinxes appear, blending human faces with animal bodies and wings. There are also images of mountain gods, figures with feet planted upon twin peaks, perhaps representing the sacred landscape itself. These reliefs speak of a mythology once alive and potent, now fragmented into stone. Each creature guarded the sanctuary, watching over the rituals performed inside. But what rituals were those? Archaeological remains suggest burnt offerings were common. Ashes and charred bones indicate sacrifices of animals, perhaps sheep or goats, performed at altars before the temple. Clay figurines found nearby may have represented worshippers or offerings to the deity. The inner sanctuary may have held a cult statue, possibly of Ishtar, draped in fine cloth and jewels, surrounded by incense burners and lamps. Pilgrims may have come seeking blessings of fertility, protection, or victory in war. Yet beyond these fragments much is unknown. What chants were spoken, what myths recited, what fears soothed, these have all vanished, leaving only silence and carved stone. The giant footprints, however, remain. They loom in memory, larger than all else. Some suggest they were linked to a ritual in which priests reenacted the god's arrival, stepping carefully along the carved prints to dramatize the divine presence. Others argue that they were intended to inspire awe and fear, to remind visitors that the temple belonged not to humans but to beings beyond comprehension. Still others speculate that they were part of a symbolic drama of fertility, in which the god's steps represented entry into the womb of the earth, the temple itself a cosmic body. Whatever their purpose, they provoke the same wonder now as they did then. Standing upon them, modern visitors cannot help but feel small, as though they have intruded upon something meant for beings far larger, older, and more powerful. The footprints connect us directly to the psychology of the ancients, to their longing to feel close to the divine, to make the invisible visible, to mark the presence of gods in stone where no eyes could otherwise see. The setting of the temple deepens its power. Ain Dara is built upon a natural terrace, overlooking a fertile valley. From its steps, worshippers could see fields stretching to the horizon, the lifeblood of their survival. Mountains rise in the distance, and beyond them, storm clouds often gather. For a people whose lives depended on rain, crops, and protection from enemies, the presence of a powerful god here would have seemed essential. The temple was both a sanctuary and a statement. Here dwells a being strong enough to guard the community, to stride across the earth with footsteps no human could match. Over the centuries, the temple fell into ruin. By the time of the Persian Empire, its rituals had ceased. Earthquakes shook its walls, villagers carried away stones for other buildings, and winds scoured its reliefs. Yet the footprints endured, carved so deeply into the basalt that no erosion could erase them fully. Even in brokenness, the temple continued to suggest the passage of gods. Modern excavations began in the 20th century, uncovering the reliefs and mapping the layout. Scholars marveled at its resemblance to biblical descriptions and at the sheer artistry of its carvings. But the footprints drew the most attention. Photographs of them circulated widely, often without explanation, feeding speculation among those fascinated by ancient mysteries. Were they evidence of ancient giants, as some fringe theorists suggested, proof of lost races, or forgotten titans? Archaeology, sober and cautious, explained them as symbolic representations, but imagination refuses to let go of their strangeness. There is something haunting about them. Carved thousands of years ago, they still speak with immediacy. We can picture the hand of the artisan chiseling the outline, shaping toes and heel, cutting deep enough that centuries of wear would not erase them. We can imagine the ritual context, the priests, the incense, the flicker of torches against basalt walls, and we can feel the awe of a villager, arriving with an offering, standing in that vast footprint, realizing how small they were before the gods. As night falls in the valley today, the ruins are quiet, the basalt stones darken, the lions stare blindly into shadow, and the footprints gather moonlight. The air cools, carrying scents of earth and dust. There is no sound of ritual, no priests chanting, no pilgrims murmuring prayers, only the wind. Yet if you close your eyes, you can almost hear footsteps echoing softly, as if some being too large to see still walks there, still enters its temple, still leaves behind impressions in stone. The Ain Dara temple remains a mystery. It is at once a ruin of stones and a monument of imagination. It shows us the artistry of a people now gone, their devotion, their myths. It teases us with parallels to other sacred sites, reminding us how ideas flowed across the ancient Near East. And it astonishes us with those carved footprints, which defy easy explanation and invite us into wonder. Perhaps that is their truest purpose, not to be solved, but to be felt. to make us remember what it is to stand small before something vast. So the temple endures, even in fragments. The lions keep their silent watch, the basalt blocks remain heavy upon the earth, and the footprints lie waiting, carved at the threshold, guiding anyone who dares to imagine the steps of forgotten gods. The Derveni Papyrus. The Derveni Papyrus lies at the crossroads of chance and eternity, a fragile scroll of carbonized papyrus that survived not because it was preserved with care, but because fire touched it and left it half-burned, paradoxically harder to destroy. Discovered in 1962 within a tomb near the Macedonian city of Derveni, this ancient manuscript would come to be recognized as the oldest surviving European manuscript, a text bridging philosophy, religion, and ritual, reaching back to the late 5th century BCE. Tonight, we wander into its mystery, unspooling its words slowly, gently, like holding the ash of something sacred, listening to echoes that have waited millennia in silence. The tomb in which it was found had been resting undisturbed for over 2,000 years. Workers digging a road near Derveni uncovered a burial mound, revealing the remains of a cremation site. The ashes of the deceased, laid to rest with offerings, included the papyrus itself, burned by the same fire that consumed the body. This chance conflagration blackened the papyrus, but also hardened it, giving it strength against the passing centuries. Where most scrolls crumbled into dust, this one endured, charred yet legible, carrying words from the edge of Greek antiquity into the present. Imagine the first archaeologist to hold it. Delicate fragments of blackened material, fragile to the touch, inscribed with letters so faint they seemed ready to vanish at a breath. Piece by piece, scholars pieced together its text, discovering something unexpected, a commentary on an Orphic poem, a hymn that sang of creation, the gods, and the order of the cosmos. In these lines, philosophy and religion entwine, ritual and reason stand together, as if the Greeks themselves wrestled with questions too vast for any one language. The papyrus is not a storybook, nor a neat scripture, but a strange and layered commentary. Its author, a philosopher priest or perhaps a learned ritual specialist, interprets an Orphic poem, a hymn attributed to the mythical poet Orpheus. This figure of legend, who charmed animals and even gods with his music, was believed to have sung truths about the universe that others could scarcely comprehend. The papyrus's commentator dissects Orpheus's words, peeling back allegory to reveal hidden meanings. For him, the gods were not simply figures of myth, but symbols for forces of nature, powers of existence, truths of philosophy. The language itself is dense, sometimes obscure, but beautiful in its austerity. A verse might speak of Zeus, only for the commentator to explain that Zeus is not a god with a beard and thunderbolt, but rather the very essence of mind, the universal reason that governs all. Another passage describing creation is unpacked into layers of cosmological allegory, where primal night, heaven, and other forces are woven into a tapestry of metaphysics. This mingling of myth and philosophy reflects a moment in Greek history when the rational inquiry of philosophers was beginning to reinterpret the religious traditions of earlier generations. Scholars believe the papyrus was written sometime in the late 5th or early 4th century BCE, during the same era that Socrates walked in Athens, when Plato was beginning to compose dialogues, and when tragedy still echoed in theaters across Greece. Yet its content feels older still, reaching back into the world of mystery cults, initiation rites, and secret hymns recited in shadowed chambers. Its preservation, then, is not only the survival of a manuscript, it is the survival of a conversation, half poem, half philosophy, whispering through the centuries. The physical scroll itself, reconstructed from hundreds of fragments, is a wonder. About 26 columns of text have been preserved, though damaged and incomplete. Its surface bears the neat handwriting of a scribe, blackened by the pyre. Each fragment is fragile, often smaller than a hand, yet together they carry a continuous argument. Scholars painstakingly studied each piece, aligning the fibers, tracing faint ink strokes, bringing sentences back to life after 2,000 years of silence. In the slow pace of discovery, the Derveni papyrus became more than a text. It became an artifact of survival, proof that fire and burial could paradoxically preserve rather than destroy. For many centuries, all papyri in Greece were lost. The humid climate and the ravages of time spared none. Only in Egypt, with its desert dryness, have scrolls of papyrus typically survived. Yet here, in northern Greece, against the odds, one manuscript endured. Its survival is both accidental and miraculous. What then does the papyrus say? Its heart lies in interpreting an Orphic theogony, a genealogy of the gods. In the fragments, Orpheus's verses describe how the world came into being, how primal forces gave way to divine order. Night is revered as a cosmic principle, a goddess older than creation, who whispers secrets to mortals. Then come the powers of heaven, earth, and ultimately Zeus, who encompasses all. But the commentator insists that Orpheus's words must not be taken literally. These deities are allegories, metaphors for physical and metaphysical forces. Zeus, he claims, is not merely the king of gods, but represents the mind that holds the cosmos together. The papyrus turns myth into philosophy, prayer into metaphysics. In this way, the Derveni papyrus reflects a broader Greek tendency to reinterpret tradition with reason. Where Homer sang of gods in human form, philosophers asked whether those forms concealed deeper truths. Where rituals invoked sacred names, commentators like this one sought to uncover their hidden logic. The result is a text hovering between ritual and rationality, both mystical and analytical. It is both commentary and initiation, explanation and revelation. But there is more in the papyrus than cosmology. Its opening sections, though fragmentary, describe ritual practices, sacrifices, libations, invocations. The commentator describes fire, incense, the summoning of daimones or spirits. It is as if the papyrus was not only explaining Orphic poetry, but also guiding a ritual practice, embedding philosophy within the lived experience of worship. To read it aloud in antiquity might have been to perform a rite, to stand at once in the world of words and in the world of ritual. One striking element is the way it interprets divine names. When Orpheus speaks of Zeus, the commentator insists this means nous, or mind. When he speaks of other deities, they too are reinterpreted. Night becomes necessity, heaven becomes the physical sky, and so on. This allegorical approach anticipates much of later philosophy, where myth is read as symbol, not literal truth. In this way, the Derveni papyrus foreshadows later thinkers like the Stoics, who also sought to reconcile traditional religion with rational understanding. To hold such a text in mind is to wander into the shadowlands between philosophy and poetry, religion and reason. Imagine sitting in a candlelit chamber, with fragments of the hymn recited, followed by explanation. A priestly figure points to the flames, to the smoke of incense rising upward, and says, "This is not merely sacrifice, it is a symbol of the soul's ascent." The audience listens, perhaps initiates into a mystery cult, eager to glimpse hidden truths. The words of Orpheus, ancient even then, are given new life through interpretation. For centuries after its discovery, the papyrus has sparked debates. Was its commentator a philosopher in the mold of the Presocratics, or was he more a ritual specialist? Did he write for initiates into Orphic mysteries, or for a wider audience of curious thinkers? Scholars argue over its intended readership, but one thing is certain: it reflects a worldview in which the sacred and the rational were not opposites but companions. The Derveni papyrus also challenges modern assumptions. We often imagine philosophy and religion as opposed, myth and reason as enemies. Yet here, in this fragile scroll, they blend. The commentator honors ritual but explains it with logic. He reveres Orpheus but insists his poetry is allegory. He stands in both worlds, refusing to abandon either. This duality makes the papyrus uniquely powerful. It reminds us that human beings, then as now, sought not only stories of gods, but also understanding. They wanted to believe, but also to explain. They longed for mystery, but also for clarity. The papyrus is therefore both a hymn and a treatise, a ritual guide and a philosophical commentary. Even its survival carries symbolic resonance. Fire, which destroyed the body of the deceased, also preserved the text buried with him. Flames consumed papyrus, yet in consuming it, hardened it against decay. From the ashes of death, a voice survived, an allegory in itself, as if Orpheus' words truly could descend into darkness and return again. Scholars today continue to work on the papyrus, using advanced imaging technologies to read faint traces of ink invisible to the naked eye. Multispectral photography has revealed additional letters, clarifying phrases that once seemed lost. With every advance, the text grows clearer, though never complete. It remains fragmentary, enigmatic, demanding interpretation, much like the Orphic verses it comments upon. The Derveni papyrus is thus not only an ancient manuscript, but also a mirror for interpretation itself. Just as its commentator read Orpheus allegorically, so modern scholars must read the papyrus fragmentarily, piecing together meaning from incomplete evidence. The act of reading itself becomes ritualistic, a slow uncovering of hidden truths across centuries. In wandering through its words, we glimpse a Greece both familiar and strange. Familiar because it wrestles with questions of existence, reason, and the divine. Questions we still ask. Strange because its language, its rituals, its cosmology belong to a world that no longer exists, a world where gods and philosophy walked side by side. The papyrus closes, in the fragments that remain, with reflections on the power of Zeus, who is all, who encompasses all things. The commentator insists this is not myth but truth, the recognition of a cosmic mind pervading existence. Whether one believes in gods or not, The thought itself is striking, that the cosmos has reason, that the universe is not chaos but order, and so the Derveni papyrus endures, fragile, incomplete, yet rich beyond measure. From a burned tomb in northern Greece to the hands of modern readers, it has traveled centuries in silence to speak again. In its charred lines, myth and philosophy converse, ritual and reason intertwine, and the voice of Orpheus, half hidden, half revealed, still sings. It is not a story with an ending, it is a meditation, a fragment, a spark in the dark, and like all true fragments, it invites us not only to listen but also to wonder, filling in the silences with our own thoughts, our own questions, our own longing for meaning. The Lothal dockyard. If you close your eyes and let your mind drift backward, far beyond the neat lines of modern maps and the mechanical certainty of clocks, you will eventually arrive at a land where the river met the sea, where tides whispered against clay banks, and where an ancient people, in their quiet brilliance, carved out one of the most remarkable structures of the ancient world. Lothal, they called it. A place that has lain silent for millennia beneath the shifting soils of Gujarat in western India. But thousands of years ago, it was alive with the sounds of water, trade, and the gentle hum of human ingenuity. It was here, amidst the settlement of the Indus Valley civilization, that one of the world's very first dockyards was built. A marvel of engineering that not only tells us about ships and trade, but about the restless imagination of a people who dreamed of harnessing water itself. The dockyard of Lothal is not simply a basin of bricks. It is in many ways a message carved into the earth. A message of confidence, of ambition, and of vision, Standing at its edge, long before it was swallowed by silt and silence, you would have seen more than walls and water. You would have seen ships, moored against carefully sloped brick embankments. You would have heard merchants calling across the waters, their voices blending with the splash of oars and the creak of ropes. You would have smelled spices, wood, oils and fish, all mingling into the unmistakable perfume of trade. But before we picture the ships, we must first slow down and look at the land itself. Lothal, around 2400 BCE, was not some accidental settlement. It was deliberately chosen. Its builders sought a place where the waters of the Sabarmati River met the Gulf of Khambhat, a tidal estuary where the currents of the land kissed the endless breath of the sea. This was no coincidence, it was a calculation. These people, whom we often picture as simple agrarians, making pottery and carving seals, were also engineers, hydrologists, astronomers, and dreamers. They knew that a settlement here could thrive not only on land, but across oceans. And so they shaped the mud and the baked brick into channels, basins, and docking facilities, creating something the world had not yet widely known, a planned port. Imagine it as it once stood. The dockyard was massive, roughly 218 meters long and 37 meters wide, with walls rising nearly 4.5 meters in height. Its bricks, set with mathematical precision, created a watertight structure that could withstand the push and pull of the tides. A spill channel allowed excess water to drain safely without destroying the structure. Sluice gates, perhaps made of heavy wood, were likely fitted to regulate the flow, and the entire system was angled with such sophistication that even as waters rose and fell, the dock remained functional. This was not a pond, nor a reservoir, this was maritime engineering, thousands of years before the great Roman harbors, before Greek triremes, before the rise of empires that would later claim mastery of the seas. As you walk slowly in your mind across its baked brick walls, you might hear the echoes of water lapping softly against the embankment. Ships would have floated gently here, crafted of sturdy timber, their bellies filled with goods, carnelian beads, ivory ornaments, copper tools, fine pottery, and the enigmatic seals engraved with animals and symbols whose meanings still elude us. These goods were not meant only for Lothal's inhabitants. They were bound for distant shores. For there is evidence, strong and undeniable, that the merchants of Lothal traded as far as Mesopotamia. Imagine that, boats from the Indus, carrying beads and gems, sailing across the Arabian Sea, docking in the lands of Sumer, Akkad, and beyond, and in return they brought back silver, tin, rare woods, and perhaps even whispers of foreign gods. The dockyard was the beating heart of this network. Without it, the ships could not anchor safely. Without it, trade would be more perilous, subject to the fury of tides. With it, however, the Indus people found not just security but prosperity. The dockyard was their gateway to the wider world, their bridge across water. What makes it even more extraordinary is not just its scale, but its survival. Think for a moment. Baked brick, carefully laid in geometric sequence, enduring 4,000 years. Rain fell, floods came, earth shifted, and still, when archaeologists uncovered it in 1954, the outlines of the dock were clear, undeniable. Even the great cities of Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro, with their grand avenues and citadels, have nothing quite like this. Lothal is unique. its dockyard unparalleled in the Indus world. And yet, as with all ancient things, mystery lingers. Was it truly a dockyard for seafaring ships? Some scholars wonder if it might have served instead as a large reservoir, storing water for agriculture or ritual. The debate still lingers, the voices of archaeologists rising like tides against each other. But the balance of evidence, the connection to tidal channels, the presence of marine shells, the seals linking Lothal to Mesopotamia, all point toward one conclusion: this was a port. A port not of imagination, but of reality. The dockyard also speaks of planning beyond its walls. Adjacent to it lay the warehouses, large brick platforms where goods were stored, counted, and prepared for shipment. Here, laborers would have stacked cargo, wrapped in reed mats and bound with rope. Here, scribes may have pressed seals into clay, marking ownership and origin. Every shipment that left Lothal carried not just material, but meaning. Each object bore the fingerprints of a civilization intent on reaching outward, on leaving an imprint far beyond its immediate world. Walk further, in your mind's eye, through the streets of Lothal. You would see neatly laid brick houses, wells for water, and drains for sewage. The same remarkable urban planning seen across the Indus world. But at Lothal, there was something more: craft. The town was a hub for bead-making. In workshops, artisans sat at stone benches, drilling tiny carnelian beads with tools tipped in diamond dust. They polished them until they gleamed like captured drops of sunlight. These beads became some of the most desired goods across the ancient trade routes. When you hold a bead from Lothal today, you hold in your hand not just an ornament, but a fragment of global exchange, proof that even 5,000 years ago humans yearned to connect across oceans. The dockyard and the workshops were inseparable. One created the goods, the other sent them forth. Together, they wove Lothal into the great web of Bronze Age trade. And it is this combination of craftsmanship and seafaring ambition that makes the site so haunting, even now. But then, as with all ancient towns, the tides of fortune shifted. Around 1900 BCE, the great Indus Valley civilization began to decline. Climate may have changed. Rivers may have shifted course. Trade routes may have faltered. Whatever the cause, Lothal's dockyard grew silent. The gates that once opened to the sea closed. The workshops grew empty. The beads remained unstrung. The sea that had once given life receded, leaving behind a silence so deep it could swallow centuries. And yet, though abandoned, the dockyard did not vanish. Buried in silt, it waited for millennia, until spades of modern archaeologists unearthed it, brushing away the soil to reveal again the walls, the basin, the channels. When they first uncovered it, they must have paused, stunned by the realization. Here, in the midst of a forgotten settlement, lay the world's earliest dock. Now, as we drift with the slow currents of thought, picture the dockyard once more. But picture it as both past and present. Past, alive with water, ships, and voices. Present, a dry basin of bricks beneath the Indian sun, silent except for the wind. The contrast is sharp, yet strangely comforting. For even in its silence, Lothal speaks. It speaks of a people who saw the sea, not as a barrier, but as a path. It speaks of human creativity, the eternal desire to shape nature to serve our dreams. And as the mind softens, surrendering to the rhythms of sleep, the dockyard becomes not just a place but a symbol. A reminder that long ago, humans stood on the edge of the sea and dared to build, to sail, to trade. They carved into the earth a basin for ships, and in so doing, carved into history a legacy that endures still. The Anta da Orca dolmen. The Anta da Orca rests in the quiet, undulating countryside of central Portugal. It is not a monument that rises in grandeur like the pyramids of Egypt, nor does it carry the monumental fame of Stonehenge. Instead, it sits quietly, weathered and softened by time, almost blending into the surrounding earth, as if it had always belonged there. And yet, for those who approach, it is immediately apparent that this is no natural accident of stone. It is deliberate, it is human-made, and it is ancient. The Anta da Orca is what archaeologists call a dolmen, a megalithic tomb built from massive stone slabs, set upright and capped with an even larger stone to form a chamber. Thousands of years ago, in the Neolithic age, long before the written word came to Portugal, before cities rose, and before empires dreamed of conquest, people here lifted stones heavier than oxen, aligning them into sacred geometry and carving into their surfaces with signs whose meanings have only partly survived into our own time. Imagine approaching the dolmen at dawn. The air is cool and damp, and the morning mist lingers low across the fields. The stones rise in a cluster, half hidden by grasses and shrubs, their surfaces streaked with lichen, their edges softened by centuries of weather. The silence is broken only by the sound of insects in the grass and the occasional call of a bird overhead. But as you draw nearer, you begin to notice the peculiar arrangement of these stones. They stand upright, forming a chamber, their flat surfaces leaning into each other, creating a space within, and at the threshold, there are markings, carved symbols, etched into the stone thousands of years ago. These carvings are perhaps the most haunting feature of the Anta da Orca, lines, circles, spirals, and shapes that we can still see today, their edges smoothed by erosion, but still undeniable, whisper of a language we do not speak. Some scholars believe they are representations of celestial objects, maps of the stars, or symbols of the journey of the soul after death. Others think they may be territorial markings, or emblems of the clans who built the dolmen. But whatever their meaning, they were cut into stone deliberately, meant to endure, meant to be seen not only by the living, but also perhaps by the spirits of the departed. Step inside the chamber, and you feel as though you are stepping outside of time. The air is cooler here, shielded by the thick slabs, and it seems to carry a weight, a hush, that is not just the silence of the countryside, but something deeper, something more reverent. This was a tomb, after all. Beneath these stones, the remains of the dead were once laid to rest. Bones, tools, fragments of pottery, offerings, tokens meant to accompany the dead into whatever awaited them. For those who built the Anta da Orca, death was not an end, but a transition. The dolmen's builders belonged to a culture we can only piece together from scattered fragments. They were farmers and herders, cultivating the land, raising livestock, shaping stone tools, weaving baskets, and living in small, tight-knit communities. Yet despite their simple technologies, they gathered the strength and knowledge to move stones weighing tons. They understood leverage, coordination, and ritual significance. The dolmen was not merely functional, it was symbolic, spiritual, an axis between the world of the living and the world of the ancestors. If you linger inside the chamber, you may notice the orientation of the stones. Many dolmens across Europe are aligned with celestial events. The rising of the sun on solstices or equinoxes, the path of the moon or particular stars. At Anta da Orca, too, there is evidence that the builders aligned the tomb in harmony with the sky. The carved symbols may have been reminders of this alignment, signs that the tomb was as much a cosmic marker as a resting place for bones. The Neolithic people who built the dolmen would have gathered here not just for burial but for ceremony. Imagine a funeral procession winding across the fields, men and women carrying baskets, pottery, and offerings, elders walking in silence, children watching wide-eyed. The body of the deceased, wrapped in woven fabric or animal hide, would be carried carefully toward the chamber. There, chants or prayers may have been spoken, fires may have flickered, drums may have echoed against the stones. The dead were not left in loneliness. They were accompanied with honor, with ritual, with symbols carved into eternal stone. Over centuries, multiple burials would take place within the dolmen. The Anta da Orca became not just a tomb for an individual, but a collective resting place, a family of ancestors, a lineage of memory. To enter the dolmen was to step into the presence of generations, each burial reinforcing the sacredness of the place. But time, relentless and unyielding, carried on. The Neolithic people who built the dolmen passed into history. Their descendants may have remembered the tomb, may have told stories of its builders, but gradually, the meaning was lost. New cultures rose and fell, new religions spread, new technologies appeared. The dolmen weathered through it all, its chamber sometimes used, sometimes abandoned, but always present, always enduring. In the modern era, archaeologists came to study it. They uncovered fragments of pottery, bones, and carvings, piecing together the practices of its builders. They marveled at the effort required to lift the stones, to carve the symbols, to orient the structure with the heavens, and yet they acknowledged the mystery that remains. We can study the dolmen, measure it, catalog its artifacts, but we cannot fully enter the minds of those who built it. What prayers did they whisper inside? What dreams did they have of the afterlife? What meaning did the spirals and circles hold for them? The Anta da Orca, like so many megalithic monuments across Europe, stands as a reminder of the depth of human imagination. Long before great temples, long before empires, humans were already shaping stone into monuments of memory, already aligning their lives with the sky, already carving symbols of mystery into rock. It is a monument to both the fragility and the endurance of human culture. Fragile because the lives and names of its builders are forgotten, enduring because their stones and symbols still stand. Thousands of years later, whispering across time, as the sun begins to set over the Portuguese countryside, the dolmen takes on a different character. The shadows lengthen, the carvings catch the low light, and the stones seem to glow faintly with a timeless presence. You can almost imagine the people who once gathered here, families, communities, generations, still lingering, their voices carried faintly on the breeze, and so, the Anta da Orca remains. Not as a ruin, not as a relic, but as a conversation between past and present. Its stones carry the weight of lives long gone. Its carvings hold secrets not yet understood, and its chamber still invites us to step inside and remember that even in the deep past, humans sought meaning, connection, and eternity. The dolmen does not demand answers. It does not explain itself. It simply stands, quiet and enduring, letting the mystery remain, and perhaps that is its greatest gift, not knowledge, but wonder. The Zbruch idol. In the rolling countryside of western Ukraine, where the gentle hills blend into the banks of the Zbruch River, an extraordinary discovery was made in the year 1848. Farmers, weary from their daily toil, came across something hidden beneath the shallow water. It was tall, carved from limestone, and unlike anything they had ever seen before. This was no ordinary stone. It was a statue, weathered but still formidable, standing over 2.5 meters high, with 4 distinct faces gazing outward to the 4 directions of the world. This was the Zbruch idol, a mysterious relic of a forgotten belief system, a pagan stone god, whose silence has stretched across more than a millennium. The idol, once buried in river mud, emerged into the light again, demanding to be seen, and yet, though it stood solid, almost imposing in its height, it also carried with it an air of fragility, as though its survival was something of an accident. Many other artifacts of Slavic paganism were lost when Christianity spread through Eastern Europe in the 10th century. Temples were razed, wooden idols burned, and sacred groves cleared to make way for churches. But somehow, this limestone monument had endured. It had hidden, quietly, waiting to be rediscovered. When archaeologists first examined the figure, they saw at once that it was unique. Few such statues had ever been preserved. The Zbruch idol was divided into 3 tiers, one stacked upon the other, like layers of a cosmic map. At the very top, 4 solemn faces shared a single head, staring outward as though they could see the entire horizon. Below them, on the central tier, human-like figures stood, holding rings, swords, and even a tiny horse. At the bottom tier, a single figure crouched, bent low, as though straining to carry the weight of the world upon his shoulders. The entire pillar was a story in stone, a worldview condensed into one monument. But what did it mean? Some scholars saw in the idol an image of the pagan pantheon, the gods of the Slavs, who were once worshipped at shrines beneath open skies. The 4 faces at the top may have represented a supreme deity, watching the cardinal directions, ensuring balance in the universe. Others saw in it a cosmic axis, a model of the world itself. The top might signify the heavens, where the gods dwelled. The middle could represent the human world, with its daily struggles, rituals, and wars. And the bottom, with its stooped figure, might show the underworld, the unseen place of ancestors and spirits who bore the foundation of all existence. The idol seemed to speak of harmony, of the interconnectedness of realms above and below, of mortal life caught between the weight of the earth and the gaze of the divine. But the mystery of the Zbruch idol lies in how little we can truly know. No inscriptions were carved into its surface. Its meaning was not written down, but instead encoded in symbols and gestures. To the people who once knelt before it, its story was obvious, living in their oral traditions. To us, centuries later, it is a puzzle, a whisper from a vanished world. The idol itself, heavy and enduring, invites us to imagine the world of the 9th century Slavs. These were people who lived close to forests, rivers, and seasons, whose survival depended on the rhythms of the natural world. Their gods, unlike the distant deities of far-off pantheons, were woven into the landscape itself. The earth was alive, the rivers sacred, the skies inhabited by forces that watched, rewarded, and punished. To carve a stone god, and to raise it high upon a sacred hill or beside a flowing river, was to make visible the power they felt all around them. And so when we look upon the Zbruch idol, we are not only seeing stone, but the echo of ceremonies long since silenced. Imagine the firelight flickering upon its carved faces, the smoke of offerings curling upward into the sky. Imagine villagers gathering around, carrying bread, milk, or animals for sacrifice, asking for health, fertility, victory, or protection from famine. In its towering presence, the idol stood as both a guardian and a mediator, connecting people to forces beyond themselves. The figure at the very bottom, the stooped bearer, is perhaps the most haunting. With bent knees and arms supporting the upper tiers, it reminds us of Atlas from Greek mythology, carrying the heavens on his back. But here, it may have been the god of the underworld, or the ancestral spirit, the one who bore the foundation of existence. Without him, the middle and upper worlds could not stand. His quiet suffering sustained all. Perhaps this was a reminder to the living that their lives were built upon the sacrifices of those who came before, ancestors who toiled, struggled, and endured. The 4 faces at the top, calm and impassive, seem almost eternal. Facing north, south, east, and west, they turn the idol into a compass, a reminder that the divine presence encircles all directions of life. Some scholars believe this may represent the supreme Slavic deity, often called Svetovid, a god of war, fertility, and prophecy, who was sometimes described as four-headed. From every direction he could see, ensuring balance and order. His many faces meant nothing could escape his gaze. The middle tier, crowded with figures, is the most human of the three. Here gods or spirits are shown holding objects, swords, rings, perhaps even symbols of harvest. One carries a horse, a sacred animal among the Slavs, linked to war, travel, and ritual sacrifice. Another holds what may be a drinking horn, suggesting feasting or communion. Each of these images reflects aspects of life, fertility, conflict, celebration, and continuity. And so, in this one pillar of stone, we see a cosmology carved. Heaven above, humanity in the middle, the underworld below. The Zbruch idol was a worldview, compressed into limestone. Its survival is almost miraculous. When Christianity spread through Kiev and Rus in the 10th century, pagan idols were systematically destroyed. Chronicles tell of wooden statues of Perun, the thunder god, being torn down and thrown into rivers. Sacred groves were chopped apart. Fire consumed what stone and iron could not. Yet this idol for some reason escaped. Perhaps it was deliberately buried by its worshippers, hidden beneath the river to keep it safe. Perhaps it was toppled and forgotten, slowly sinking beneath the mud. For centuries it lay there, submerged, its watchful faces staring into dark waters, unseen by human eyes. Only in the 19th century did it rise again. Today, the Zbruch idol rests in a museum in Krakow, Poland, carefully preserved, yet its story continues to inspire. For many modern Slavs, it has become a symbol of cultural identity, a reminder of ancestral beliefs nearly erased by time. For others, it is a riddle, a piece of an unfinished puzzle, hinting at traditions that have left few other traces. When you look upon it, even now, there is a sense of presence. The faces seem calm but knowing. The figures, though weathered, carry their objects with quiet determination. The stooped bearer continues his eternal work, lifting the world above him. It is as though the stone itself still believes it is alive, still carrying meaning for those who look upon it. The Zbruch idol speaks across centuries, not through words but through silence. In that silence lies its power. We may never know exactly what rituals were performed before it, what prayers were whispered, what songs were sung, but perhaps that is the point. Mystery has its own kind of sacredness, and so the Zbruch idol endures, a guardian of forgotten gods, a four-faced witness to the passage of time, standing between the living and the long-vanished world that once carved it into being. The Lion Gate of Hattusa. The road is quiet tonight. Imagine yourself walking slowly along a winding path through the hills of central Anatolia, where the air is cool, touched with a faint dryness, and the ground beneath your feet is covered in low shrubs and scattered stones that seem older than memory. This place, far from the restless cities and noise of the modern world, holds the remnants of a power once so great that it shaped kingdoms, treaties, and myths alike. You are walking toward a gate unlike any you have seen, for it is not only a threshold of stone but also a threshold of time, the Lion Gate of Hattusa. It stands at the edge of what was once the capital city of the Hittite Empire, a power that rose in the 2nd millennium BCE, rivaling even mighty Egypt and Mesopotamia. Yet the gate still whispers. Its massive lions, carved from single blocks of volcanic stone, stare with eternal vigilance. They do not move, yet their presence is alive. Their gaze is not just that of beasts, but of guardians, protectors that watched as kings, soldiers, traders, and priests passed into the heart of an empire. Let us walk slowly closer. Notice the stones underfoot, worn smooth by centuries of passage. As you approach the Lion Gate, the walls rise high on either side, built from cyclopean masonry, massive, carefully cut boulders stacked with precision and fitted without mortar. Their size alone inspires awe, but their silence speaks louder still. This is no mere ruin. It is the echo of an empire that believed stone itself could hold memory, that lions could outlast kings, and that gates could be more than passageways. They could be guardians of destiny. The lions are enormous. Their carved bodies are pressed into the massive blocks, their heads projecting forward, jaws open in a frozen roar. Their fangs are sharp, their eyes bulging with watchfulness, their manes carved in stylized curls. Yet look more carefully, and you notice a strange duality. They are both terrifying and protective. To the Hittites, the lion was the embodiment of both danger and guardianship. Passing through the Lion Gate was not merely entering a city, it was entering sacred ground under the eyes of divine protectors. The Hittite Empire, stretching across Anatolia and into northern Syria, reached its height around 1300 BCE. From their citadel at Hattusa, the kings of the Hittites ruled over a vast territory, commanding armies, forging alliances, and recording treaties on clay tablets. Here, behind these walls, they planned campaigns against rival empires, corresponded with pharaohs, and conducted rituals to the storm gods they revered. The Lion Gate was one of the principal entrances to their capital, a threshold every visitor would see, be they merchant, ambassador, soldier, or king. Imagine the sound of ancient footsteps. A caravan approaches the city. Donkeys carry goods, copper, tin, textiles, grain. Soldiers march, their bronze weapons clinking softly. A priest murmurs a chant as he walks, glancing up at the carved lions to remind himself that he is entering a place where gods and men converse. The massive stone lions would loom above them all, their open mouths seeming to breathe out silent warnings. This city is strong, this city is protected, and those who enter must do so with respect. The lions were not placed here by accident. In Hittite belief, lions had a sacred dimension. They were associated with power, strength, and divine guardianship. They appeared in royal seals, in mythological scenes, and in temple rituals. In carving lions onto their gates, the Hittites were not simply showing artistic skill, they were creating a magical boundary. The gate became more than stone, it became a living threshold, guarded by forces beyond human sight. Walk a little closer, and run your hand along the stone. The surface is rough, yet smooth, in places where thousands of years of wind, rain, and touch have worn it down. The lion's features remain sharp despite the centuries, a testament to the skill of the craftsmen who carved them. Think of those artisans, chiseling into massive blocks of volcanic rock. Each strike of their tools carried meaning, each curve of the mane designed to inspire both fear and reassurance. Did they whisper prayers as they carved, asking the lions to awaken? Did they imagine themselves giving life to stone? Beyond the gate lies the city itself. Hattusa stretched across a vast area, with walls running for kilometers, enclosing temples, palaces, granaries, and homes. Its streets wound through terraces and hills, leading upward toward the great temple of the storm god and the royal citadel. From the Lion Gate one could ascend into the heart of this sacred and political power. The gate was not only an entrance, but also a statement. It said to all who passed, "You are entering a world where humans rule with the blessing of gods, where stone lions guard secrets, and where the strength of an empire is etched into every block of masonry." Now pause for a moment. The evening sun casts long shadows across the gate. The lions glow in a soft golden light. Behind them, the hills are quiet, covered in the murmurs of insects and the distant calls of birds. The city itself is silent now, its people long gone, its walls crumbled, but the gate remains, the lions still watch. And if you listen closely, you might almost hear the faint echo of voices, chants, conversations, commands, carried through time like whispers in the wind. The Lion Gate was one of several monumental entrances into Hattusa. Others included the King's Gate, with its carved warrior figure, and the Sphinx Gate, adorned with fantastical guardians. Each had its own symbolism, its own role in protecting the sacred heart of the city, but the Lion Gate stands out for its primal imagery. Lions, after all, are universal. They need no translation. Their power is immediate, their message clear. To the Hittites, they were not just animals but symbols of the gods themselves. The Hittites recorded myths in which lions played roles as sacred companions of deities, or as forces unleashed in times of chaos. They also used lions in ritual hunts, echoing a royal ideology shared with Mesopotamian kings, where the king's ability to dominate the lion symbolized his ability to rule. Thus, passing through the Lion Gate was also a reminder of the king's strength, his alignment with divine power, and his ability to keep order in the world. Yet there is another mystery. Were these lions purely symbolic, or did the Hittites believe that they held actual magical force? In the worldview of the Bronze Age, there was little distinction between art, religion, and power. The carving of a lion could itself be an invocation, a summoning of strength and protection. Standing before the Lion Gate today, one cannot help but wonder if the Hittites believed these lions were alive in some sense, their stone bodies housing spirits that guarded the city forever. Let us walk slowly under the arch. Look up. The gate once had a lintel above, perhaps wooden, now gone, but the sense of passing between guardians remains. You can feel the threshold as you cross it. On one side is the outer world, the land of travelers, fields and hills. On the other side is the sacred city, the space of kings and priests. The gate divides these worlds. To cross is to submit, to recognize the power within. And yet, the Lion Gate is not only about power, it is also about endurance. Long after the Hittite Empire fell around 1200 BCE, in the great upheavals that shook the ancient world, the gate remained. Empires collapsed, cities burned, languages were forgotten, but the lions stayed, silent and immovable. They watched as new peoples settled the land, as farmers plowed fields nearby, as shepherds guided flocks past their gaze. They endured not because anyone maintained them, but because they were carved with such intention, such strength, that they became part of the earth itself. Even when Hattusa was rediscovered in the modern era, the Lion Gate stood waiting. Archaeologists uncovered its stones, studied its carvings, and marveled at its preservation. And still the lions stared back. unblinking, as if amused by the passage of centuries. The guardians had never left. Perhaps that is why standing before the Lion Gate inspires such wonder. It is not just the artistry, nor just the history. It is the feeling that these lions are more than carvings. They are presences. They watched kings come and go, armies march in triumph and in defeat, rituals rise in smoke to the heavens, and finally, silence fall over the city. Yet they remain. And so, the Lion Gate is not just a ruin, it is a reminder that power is fleeting, that empires fall, but that stone and symbol endure. The lions, carved to protect the Hittite capital, still guard something greater. They guard memory itself. Take one last look before we step back. The lion's jaws are open, but they make no sound. Their eyes bulge, but they do not see as we do. They exist in another kind of time, a time where centuries are brief, and 1,000 years is but a moment. They are not waiting for anything, they are simply being. And as you step back into the quiet hills, leaving the Lion Gate behind, you carry with you the sense of crossing a threshold, not just of stone but of history itself. The lions will continue to watch, as they always have, as they always will. And perhaps that is their true power, not to guard a city long gone, but to remind us of the endurance of memory, the resilience of symbols, and the eternal gaze of stone. The Unartok disk. The Arctic air moves slowly, almost like a sigh drifting across endless white horizons. Snow crunches beneath boots, the silence broken only by the whisper of wind, carrying a taste of salt from the frozen seas. Imagine yourself standing on the edge of Greenland, the island's icy cliffs falling sharply into the cold waves below. In this vast, unyielding expanse of sea and sky, there is little to guide you. Landmarks disappear beneath storms. Clouds smother the sun. The stars, so reliable in other parts of the world, are often hidden behind veils of endless gray. And yet, 1,000 years ago, Viking sailors left these shores and returned, again and again across thousands of kilometers of open water. They did not have compasses, nor sextants, nor maps as we know them. What they carried instead was something far humbler, but no less mysterious. A small wooden disc, unearthed centuries later at a ruined monastery on the southern Greenland coast, near a place called Unartok. The Unartok disc. A simple carved piece of wood, broken in half, its edges worn by time. And yet within its markings lies a key to one of history's most daring feats: how the Vikings steered their ships across oceans, reaching as far as Iceland, Greenland, and even Vinland, what we know today as North America. This is the story of the disc, but it is also the story of those who held it in their rough, calloused hands. Those who trusted it, not entirely, but enough to risk their lives, and the seas they crossed, which could turn calm waters into walls of death in moments. As you listen, allow the rhythm of the waves, the crackle of wood on the longship's hull, and the muted hum of distant winds to draw you into that world. The disc itself is small, no bigger than the palm of a hand. Discovered in 1948 during excavations at the ruins of a Norse Benedictine monastery on Unartok Island, it appeared at first unremarkable, just a broken piece of wood, perhaps the lid of a container, or the base of some forgotten tool. But upon closer inspection, carved lines emerged, lines that did not seem decorative, but functional. The surface bore faint etchings, concentric circles, radiating points, markings that hinted at measurement. Scholars puzzled over it. Some suggested it was part of a game, a piece of a decorative box, even a religious object. But as decades passed, more comparisons were made. Other Viking artifacts came to light: fragments of crystals, stories passed down in sagas, and the known reliance of Norse sailors on the sun. Slowly, the theory took shape. This was not just wood, it was a solar compass. Imagine now a Viking ship preparing to set sail. The long, narrow vessel rests on the shingle shore, its carved dragon head rising high above the surf. Sailors load provisions, barrels of dried fish, kegs of water, woolen blankets, iron tools. The air is filled with the sound of clanking metal, creaking wood, and the low murmur of voices hardened by salt air. At the center of it all, a navigator stands, holding a small disc. The disc is placed flat, a wooden needle or shadow stick fixed upright in its center. As the sun moves across the sky, shadows fall upon the carved markings. By noting where the shadow falls at certain times of day, the navigator can find direction, not perfectly, but with enough certainty to guide a ship west, east, or north across waters where no land can be seen. The genius of the disc lies in its simplicity. To the untrained eye, it looks like nothing at all, but to those who know how to read it, it becomes a silent map, a compass carved not with iron, but with understanding of the heavens. But even more fascinating is how the Vikings may have used it when the sun itself disappeared. For in Greenland, the skies are not always clear. Fog rolls in without warning, swallowing the horizon. Clouds stretch endlessly, hiding both sun and stars. In such moments, the Unartok disc alone would have been useless. And yet there is another layer to this mystery, the so-called sunstone. Legends tell of a crystal the Vikings carried, a transparent stone that could capture and polarize light. Even when the sun was hidden, the stone could reveal its position, scattering beams in a way that told navigators where the hidden orb lay. Recent experiments with Iceland spar, a kind of calcite crystal, suggest this was possible. Held up to the sky, the stone refracts light in two directions. By rotating it until both beams shine with equal brightness, one can determine the sun's position, even in thick cloud or just after sunset. Now imagine the navigator holds the crystal in one hand, the wooden disc in the other. He tilts the crystal to the sky, seeking the ghost of the sun's position. Then he lowers it, marks the disc with a finger, places the gnomon stick upright, and adjusts the course of the ship. Around him, the crew waits silently, trusting his judgment. A wrong turn means not just delay but death, for if they miss Iceland or fail to find the fjords of Greenland, there is nothing but endless sea. The sea itself must be imagined here in its full terror and beauty. The North Atlantic is not the calm Mediterranean, nor the mild waters of the English Channel. These are harsh seas, where waves rise like moving mountains, where winds scream like spirits in the rigging. Cold sprays of salt sting the eyes, freeze in the beard, numb the fingers, and yet these ships built of oak, bound with iron rivets, sealed with tar and wool, were sturdy enough to ride those waters like living creatures. The navigator's task was relentless. By day he checked the sun's shadow upon the disk. By night he read the stars when the clouds allowed. By storm he listened to the sea itself, noting the rhythm of swells and the direction of the wind. The disk was but one tool in a mind filled with memorized knowledge, the distance between landmarks, the smell of seaweed, the cry of certain birds. And yet, the Unartok disk is unique because it speaks of an attempt to fix this knowledge into a physical, repeatable form, a way of capturing in wood the movements of sky and sea. What stories this disk could tell, if wood could speak. Who carved it? A monk, repurposing knowledge from Norse sailors, a ship's master, testing a design passed down through whispered instruction, or perhaps it was never meant to be found. Left behind at the monastery, it survived the centuries like a whisper sealed in earth, waiting for modern hands to uncover it. The disk's survival itself feels improbable. Wood, in Greenland's damp soil, decays quickly, yet here it is, preserved enough for us to see. Its broken state adds to its mystery, half of it missing, as though deliberately snapped, perhaps discarded when it was no longer useful. Or maybe it broke in transit, the shipwreck never found, the sailor never returning, and so we imagine again the voyage. The longship leaves Unartok's fjords, slipping into open water. The sky darkens with storm, waves rise, the horizon vanishes. In that moment, the navigator crouches low, shielding the disk and stone beneath his cloak, peering, adjusting, whispering commands. The sail shifts, the ship turns, and slowly, land returns to sight. For centuries the disk lay silent, until archaeologists uncovered it in the 20th century, brushing soil from its worn face, holding it up to the light, seeing in its faint lines the ghost of a compass. And in that moment, a bridge stretched across time, from our world of satellites and GPS back to theirs, when a scrap of carved wood and a shard of crystal were enough to cross oceans. It is humbling, perhaps, to think that one of history's greatest feats of navigation relied not on technology, but on trust. Trust in the sun to appear, trust in the sea to follow its patterns, trust in a small disk of wood to whisper direction in the void. The Unartok disk reminds us that history is not only written in grand monuments, but in quiet artifacts, things easily overlooked, yet essential. A disk that once guided men across the sea, now guiding us across time. And so, as the waves still crash on Greenland's frozen shores, as the winds still move in endless circles across the Arctic sky, the story of the disk endures. A small object, a great mystery, a reminder of how fragile yet determined human journeys have always been. The Sumerian king list tablet. The tablet is small, simple, unassuming. Fired clay, etched with wedge-shaped strokes of cuneiform. It looks like countless other relics unearthed in Mesopotamia. But when scholars deciphered its words, they found not a mere record of harvests or trade, not a list of offerings to the gods or tallies of barley, but something stranger, deeper. This was the Sumerian king list, a document unlike any other, one that does not just record rulers, but stitches together history and myth into a single flowing line of time. It tells us of kings who reigned for lifetimes longer than empires, for centuries upon centuries, even for tens of thousands of years. It tells of floods, of dynasties, of power passed from city to city, as if destiny itself moved across the Mesopotamian plain. It is at once a chronicle, a myth, and perhaps a mirror of how ancient Sumerians made sense of the world. To sit with the king list is to drift into the dreamlike border between memory and legend, and so we linger there now, tracing its lines, imagining the hands that pressed these marks into wet clay, nearly 4,000 years ago, when the world was still young and history had only just begun to take form. The Sumerian king list survives in several versions, copied and recopied by scribes over centuries. The most complete of them, known as the Weld-Blundell prism, rests today in the Ashmolean Museum at Oxford. It is a four-sided clay prism, each face covered in fine cuneiform, its edges worn by time, but its words still legible. Imagine it turning slowly under lamplight, the writing like tiny ladders of symbols running down each side, recounting rulers, dynasties, floods, and shifts in divine favor. It is no ordinary document, it is a tapestry of an entire worldview. The list begins in myth. It declares, when kingship descended from heaven, kingship was in Eridu. With this single line the tone is set. Kingship is not born of men, nor chosen by the people, but sent from the heavens, a divine institution entrusted to mortal hands. The earliest rulers named here are not kings, as we think of them, but figures of a more primeval kind. Alulim, the first king, ruled in Eridu, the first city. His reign lasted, according to the tablet, for 28,800 years. After him came Alaugar, ruling for 36,000 years. And so it goes, king after king, city after city, with reigns stretching across vast, impossible spans of time. These are not merely exaggerations, they are signals. To the Sumerians, the first kings were closer to the gods, living in an era before the Great Flood, when lifespans stretched into the unfathomable. Their longevity was proof of their connection to the divine, a way of distinguishing mythic ages from the human ages that would follow. After Eridu, kingship passes to Bad Tabira, then Larak, then Sippar, then Shuruppak. Each city has its moment as the seat of divine authority. And then, as the king list tells us with stark finality, the flood swept over. That single phrase divides worlds. It marks the transition from mythic time into something closer to human memory. The flood it describes is not unlike the flood of the Epic of Gilgamesh, where Utnapishtim builds an ark, saves animals, and survives the deluge sent by the gods. Echoes of it appear in countless cultures. The biblical Noah, the flood of Deucalion in Greece, floods of Hindu tradition. It is as if this story is etched deep in humanity's shared consciousness. And in the king list, it is the boundary. Before the flood, kings lived thousands of years. After it, lifespans shrink, the record grows more grounded. Time becomes more recognizable, though still shimmering with myth. When kingship rises again after the flood, it does so in Kish, a city that becomes the first dynastic power in post-Diluvian Sumer. Here the reigns are still long, but no longer cosmic. 1,200 years, 960 years, 625 years. The numbers still dwarf human life, yet they suggest a shift toward the mortal. Among these rulers is Atana of Kish, remembered as the shepherd who ascended to heaven and consolidated all the foreign lands. Atana is a figure halfway between myth and man. In later tales, he is described as the one who mounted an eagle to reach the heavens in search of the plant of birth, a remedy for childlessness. Was Atana a king, a mythic hero? The king list places him firmly in history, yet his story drifts beyond it. Dynasties rise and fall. Kingship passes from Kish to Uruk, then to Ur, then to Awan, Hamazi, Mari, and beyond. Each city holds the scepter for a time, then loses it, as if destiny itself tires of one place and moves to another. This rhythm of transfer is crucial. It is not men who hold power, but heaven that bestows kingship and withdraws it. The king list is not just a record, it is a philosophy of time, of fate, of the ephemeral nature of cities, and the permanence of divine order. In Uruk, we encounter Gilgamesh, the king who needs no introduction. Unlike Alulim or Alaugar, Gilgamesh feels more familiar. His reign is given as 106 years, still impossibly long, yet closer to the scale of legend rather than cosmic time. He is described as the son of a goddess, Ninsun, and a mortal father, Lugalbanda, himself listed as a king of Uruk. Through Gilgamesh, we glimpse the weaving of the king list with epic tradition, the same figure who fights Humbaba, who journeys to the ends of the earth seeking immortality, who mourns Enkidu, also stands among the names of rulers as though history and myth were one fabric. From Uruk, kingship shifts again, to Ur, to Adab, to Akkad, and here history begins to sharpen further. Names like Sargon of Akkad appear, figures we know not only from legend, but from inscriptions, monuments, and archaeology. Sargon, who founded the Akkadian Empire around 23-4 BCE, becomes one of the first truly historical kings whose deeds resonate across centuries. His grandson, Naram-Sin, likewise appears, remembered for declaring himself divine, for leading campaigns, for carving the famous victory stele of Naram-Sin. The king list continues on, threading through the dynasties of Isin, Larsa, Babylon, At times it smooths over the chaos of overlapping reigns, the rivalries between cities, the patchwork of power. It presents history not as it happened, but as it ought to have happened. A single line, a clear succession, one city, one king at a time. It is less a record of events than a shaping of them into cosmic order, and yet, for all its blending of myth and fact, the king list is invaluable. It offers one of the earliest attempts to craft a chronology, to bind time into sequence. It suggests that humans, even at the dawn of writing, hungered to place themselves within a story larger than themselves, to make sense of past and present through ordered lines of succession. Imagine the scribes copying this list, generation after generation, bent over tablets in the glow of oil lamps, stylus in hand, pressing wedge shapes into damp clay. They were not just recording, they were preserving a worldview. Each time the list was recopied, the names of ancient kings, half-gods, flood survivors, empire builders were renewed, given life again. To read the king list was to participate in memory, to link the present with the mythic past. What strikes us most is the tone. There is no embellishment, no epic poetry, no moralizing. The king list is matter of fact. So-and-so ruled for 36,000 years. The city was defeated. Kingship passed to another. It is almost bureaucratic, yet in its starkness lies a dreamlike rhythm. To hear it read aloud is to enter a trance of names, numbers, dynasties, an incantation of time itself. Today scholars debate its meaning. Some see in the enormous reign lengths evidence of astronomical cycles, symbolic numbers, or the compression of entire dynasties into single names. Others see echoes of oral tradition, where memory stretches and compresses. Still others read it as political propaganda, a way for later dynasties to legitimize themselves by inserting their names into a line stretching back to the dawn of time. And so the king list remains as enigmatic as the kings it names. It is at once a ledger, a myth, a bridge between gods and men. It reminds us that history is never only fact but always story, always shaped by those who tell it. If you could hold the tablet now in your hands, you would feel its weight. Not heavy, not grand, just clay, hardened by millennia. And yet within its surface lies an entire cosmos of meaning, a chain of rulers, stretching from the first city to the empires of Babylon. A memory of floods, of divine descent, of kings who once lived for 1,000 years. As you sit with it, you might feel time slow. You might feel yourself slipping between ages, watching cities rise and fall in the long ebb and flow of Mesopotamian plains. The names blur into one another, as if you are listening to a chant that has gone on for centuries, unbroken, a chant of kings, of dynasties, of the fragile, enduring human need to remember. And in that chant, perhaps, you feel sleep drawing near. The world softens. The names of forgotten kings drift through your mind, like waves on a dark river, flowing endlessly into the distance, carrying you with them into dreams. The Golden Man of Issyk. The winds of the Eurasian steppe are unbroken, rolling endlessly across a horizon that seems to go on forever. Here, in a sea of grasses and sky, time itself feels suspended. The land seems empty to the passing eye, but beneath its soil and among its mounds of earth lie stories carved in gold, fragments of forgotten peoples who rode across these plains thousands of years ago. One of the most remarkable of these discoveries came in 1969, when archaeologists digging near the small town of Issyk in southeastern Kazakhstan unearthed something so dazzling, so improbable, that it would change the way history understood the Scythians, the nomadic horse-riding peoples of the steppe. It was the burial of a figure now known as the Golden Man. The discovery took place at a burial mound, or kurgan, typical of Scythian and Saka culture. These kurgans dotted the Kazakh steppe, sometimes rising like low hills from the flat expanses. They were the burial places of warriors, nobles, and rulers, constructed as monumental earth mounds over timber-lined tombs. Many of these had long been plundered by looters over the centuries. Yet at Issyk, the burial chamber that was unearthed revealed something nearly intact, a chamber filled with treasures, weapons, ornaments, and most strikingly, the remains of a young individual clothed from head to toe in golden attire. This person, whether prince, princess, or warrior, has come to be called the Golden Man, though some scholars argue the title of Golden Woman might also apply. What made the burial so extraordinary was not simply the presence of gold, though there were more than 4,000 golden ornaments discovered, but the sophistication of the craftsmanship, the symbolism, and the aura of authority it conveyed. Here was not merely wealth buried underground. Here was a body adorned as though becoming a god, every piece of metal carrying meaning, each ornament designed to transform the deceased into something more than mortal. The figure lay dressed in a garment stitched with thousands of small golden plaques, each cut into the shape of animals, winged horses, deer, snow leopards, birds of prey, ibex, and other creatures of the steppe. Each animal was not random decoration, but part of a symbolic language. In Scythian and Saka belief, Animals represented forces of nature, protectors and guides for the soul. The stag, in particular, was a central figure in steppe mythology, a symbol of life, rebirth and cosmic movement. To be clad in gold animals was to wrap the body in the strength of the natural world, an eternal armor. But the most striking piece of the golden man's attire was the towering headdress. Rising high from the skull, this ornate crown-like piece was covered with golden plaques arranged in a tiered form, decorated with images of horses, arrows, and tree-like motifs. Its height would have made the wearer appear taller, more imposing, perhaps otherworldly, especially in ritual. Some archaeologists see in the headdress a symbol of the world tree, the cosmic pillar that connects earth, sky, and underworld in many steppe mythologies. The one buried at Issyk was not simply laid to rest, but raised as a cosmic mediator, one who in death was elevated to the realm of gods. The burial chamber itself spoke of a people who valued both artistry and symbolism. Alongside the golden ornaments, archaeologists found weapons, iron swords, daggers, arrowheads, suggesting the deceased was a warrior, or at least one surrounded by martial imagery. Pottery vessels, bronze items, and wooden containers were also uncovered, offerings to accompany the journey into the afterlife. Each object was carefully placed, each a reminder that life and death were inseparable from the rituals of the community. One of the most tantalizing finds in the Issyk burial was not made of gold, but clay. It was a small silver cup inscribed with 26 characters in a script that has never been fully deciphered. Known as the Issyk inscription, it remains one of the great puzzles of Central Asian archaeology. Was it written in an early form of Saka language? Was it a ritual text, a name, a dedication? The inscription resists translation, standing like a voice from the grave that whispers but never quite speaks. This detail, perhaps more than any other, reminds us that while we can admire the gold, the brilliance, and the artifacts, we are still outsiders, peering into a world whose language is partly lost. The age of the burial has been dated to around the 4th or 5th century BCE, a time when the Scythians and related Saka tribes dominated the Eurasian steppe. They were not builders of cities, nor writers of chronicles. Instead, they were nomads, horsemen who carried their lives with them, moving with the seasons, living in felt tents, and mastering the art of mounted archery. To their settled neighbors, like the Persians and Greeks, the Scythians were both feared and admired. Herodotus, the Greek historian, wrote of their ferocity, their customs, their strange rituals. To him they were almost mythic, a people who drank the blood of enemies, who buried their kings with attendants, and who lived in a world that seemed harsh, alien, and boundless. And yet the Issyk burial complicates this image. The Golden Man was not only a warrior, but a figure of sophistication. The delicacy of the goldwork suggests artisans of incredible skill, able to hammer sheets of gold so thin and yet so precise that they could create lifelike animals, only a few centimeters in size. The symmetry, the attention to detail, and the abundance of symbolic motifs reveal a culture that was rich in meaning, not merely in violence. It was a society that understood beauty, myth, and the power of ritual adornment. There remains debate over the identity of the Golden Man. Was it truly a prince, as many assume? Some scholars point to the possibility of a female ruler or princess. The remains were fragmentary, and while some argue for a young male, others believe the burial could be female, perhaps a warrior queen or priestess. If so, it would align with accounts that among the Scythians, women sometimes fought alongside men, and that queens could hold great power. Either way, the figure at Issyk was someone of extraordinary status, whose death warranted a transformation into gold. The broader context of the burial is also important. The Issyk kurgan is part of a vast landscape of burial mounds across Kazakhstan, stretching like constellations across the land. These mounds tell of a people who honored their dead, not in hidden graves but in monumental earthworks, visible for miles. To bury someone beneath a mound was to inscribe their memory into the land itself, a permanent marker in a shifting sea of grass. The Golden Man, therefore, was not meant to be forgotten. He, or she, was meant to be remembered for centuries, perhaps eternally. Today, the Golden Man has become a national symbol of Kazakhstan. Replicas of the figure stand in museums, public squares, and monuments. It represents not only a discovery of the past, but a reclamation of heritage. For centuries, nomadic history was written by outsiders, by Greeks, Persians, Chinese, and later by Russians. But the Issyk burial, unearthed in Kazakh soil, belongs to the steppe itself. It is a voice of the ancestors, shining in gold, declaring that here once lived a people of brilliance, artistry, and spirit. The figure's enduring fascination lies in its combination of mystery and clarity. We can see the gold, the shapes, the animals, the headdress. We can trace the hands of the artisans who crafted each plaque. And yet, the story of the person remains elusive. We do not know their name, their deeds, or their precise role. Were they a ruler who led armies, a spiritual figure who mediated between people and gods, a young noble whose life was cut short but whose death became eternal. The Issyk burial answers and conceals in equal measure. As we imagine the burial, one can picture the funeral itself, the body dressed in golden attire, shimmering in the light of torches, the mourners, warriors, kin, shamans, standing in silence as chants filled the air, the headdress rising tall, the animals gleaming as though alive. Then, the body lowered into the chamber, weapons laid at the side, the silver cup with its cryptic inscription placed near the hand. The chamber sealed, covered with timber, then with earth, until a mound rose above the plains. To the living, the figure had passed into eternity. To us, rediscovering centuries later, it is as though the person still waits, gleaming in silence. And so, the Golden Man of Issyk endures as both history and legend. It is an archaeological treasure, a national icon, and a reminder of how much of the past lies hidden beneath the surface of familiar landscapes. In the endless steppe, where the wind never ceases, gold still sleeps under the earth, carrying stories of people whose names are forgotten, but whose splendor will always shine. The Dasana petroglyphs. Deep in the Amazon rainforest, where rivers coil like silver serpents and the forest canopy weaves a ceiling of endless green, there lies a place where stone remembers what people have long forgotten. The Dasana petroglyphs are not a grand monument, not an easily visible temple or towering ruin. They are instead humble yet bewildering carvings etched onto stones along the riverside, hidden among moss, vines, and the slow, eternal breath of the jungle. They whisper of stars, of journeys, and of a knowledge that seems to stretch far beyond the ordinary scope of time. Imagine yourself drifting upriver on a dugout canoe, the air heavy with the scent of wet leaves and soil, insects thrumming all around. The water reflects the dim light of the sun breaking through branches, and soon you see the rock's flat surfaces, polished by countless floods, engraved with designs that do not fade despite the weight of centuries. Circles within circles, spirals, straight lines crossing like constellations. Some marks resemble celestial charts, others abstract maps, but all are etched with a patience and purpose, suggesting that whoever carved them saw the universe in ways we do not yet fully understand. The Dasana people of the Amazon still tell stories about them. They say that the markings are not merely decorations, but the footprints of the sky. Their ancestors looked upward at night, watching the stars move, and then downward at these carvings, where the heavens had been carefully mirrored in stone. For them, the cosmos was not separate from the earth, but deeply woven into every river, every bird call, every breath of wind. These petroglyphs were maps not just for navigation, but for living. Guides to when the rains would come, when fish would swim upriver, when the forest would give its fruit, and when it would withhold. Archaeologists who stumbled upon these stones in the 20th century found themselves staring at designs that seemed almost mathematical. Spirals echo the paths of planets. Grids look like star lattices. Concentric circles resemble sun and moon cycles. But unlike modern star charts, these were carved not on parchment or parchment-thin instruments, but directly onto rock, meant to endure, and endure they did. Though floods, storms, and the encroaching forest, picture a community gathered long ago on this very spot. The river murmurs beside them, carrying both fish and secrets. The night sky stretches above with piercing clarity, no city lights to dim it. An elder kneels at the rock, tracing a carving with their fingers. Perhaps they are explaining to the children how this spiral relates to the great river in the sky, the Milky Way. How this cluster of dots is not merely a pattern of stars, but the home of spirits and ancestors. The children listen, wide-eyed, while the fire crackles, and above them, the stars wheel in quiet agreement. What makes the Dasana petroglyphs so mysterious is that they are not alone. Across the Amazon, scattered in dozens of sites, similar carvings appear: spirals, stars, grids, as though the entire rainforest had once been mapped according to celestial laws. These sites often lie near water, suggesting that rivers and stars were seen as threads of the same fabric, guiding the people in both the visible and invisible worlds. Some scholars suggest that these petroglyphs might date back thousands of years, long before any surviving Amazonian cultures left written records. Others believe they were continuously renewed, each generation recarving the designs, keeping them alive, preserving a memory too important to forget. The Dasana themselves believe these stones are sacred. They are the touchpoints where sky and earth converse. Now imagine standing before one of these carvings as twilight falls. The jungle grows louder, cicadas filling the air with their steady, almost hypnotic pulse. Bats flit out from the trees, their wings catching the fading light. The river reflects the first emerging stars. As your eyes adjust, you realize that the carvings on the stone beneath you mirror the constellations above, almost perfectly. It is as though the earth had been turned into a blackboard, and the universe had stooped down to sketch its own reflection. Some carvings appear to map the Pleiades, others Orion, and still others align with solstices. but they also show formations that modern astronomy does not name, clusters that seem to exist more in myth than in science. Could they be constellations that belong to a worldview now lost? Or were they visions of something else, something no telescope has yet revealed? There are even stories that suggest the petroglyphs were not carved by human hands at all. Some Dasana myths speak of beings who descended from the stars, teaching their ancestors to look upward and downward at once, to see the reflection of the sky in every stone and ripple of water. For the people of the forest, this was not science fiction. It was simply the truth of their world, that life came from the stars and would return there. The most haunting thing about these petroglyphs is their endurance. In the Amazon, where the forest swallows entire villages, where rivers erase footprints overnight, and where wood and bone vanish within years, these stones remain. Their carvings, though weathered, refuse to disappear. They hold knowledge that is older than the colonial records, older than the pyramids of the Americas, perhaps older than the Amazon's current tribes themselves. They are, in a way, the memory of the forest, etched permanently into its bones. If you lean close to the rock, you might see details that feel startlingly modern. Geometrical accuracy, symmetry, proportions that recall advanced measuring tools. Yet these people had no metal, no telescopes, no compasses as we know them. Their tools were stone, wood, bone, and still they left behind a map of the heavens. The rainforest at night provides the perfect backdrop for understanding why. With no artificial light, the stars blaze in overwhelming numbers, rivers gleam like liquid constellations themselves. To live in such a place was to live constantly beneath the dialogue of sky and water. It was inevitable that people would seek to record it, to capture its movements, to freeze its rhythms onto something lasting, and so they chose stone. The Dasana petroglyphs remind us of something both humbling and profound, that humanity has always gazed upward, always searched for patterns, always tried to connect the vastness above with the intimacy of life below. These carvings are not simply relics. They are echoes of questions we still ask today, about where we come from, how we fit into the cosmos, and what lies beyond the veil of the visible. As you picture yourself lying beside the carvings, the jungle darkening around you, you begin to drift into the rhythm of their meanings. The spirals turn slowly in your mind, like galaxies. The dots twinkle like stars, the lines stretch like rivers and pathways leading into unknown worlds. You breathe in the thick Amazon air, the smell of wet earth, the sound of frogs croaking like distant drums. Slowly, the petroglyphs blur with the constellations above until you cannot tell which is stone and which is sky. And in that half-dreaming state, you begin to sense why the Dasana carved them. They were not merely recording what they saw. They were inviting generations to return, to remember, and to feel the eternal conversation between earth and cosmos. The stones keep their secrets, the forest keeps its silence, and the stars keep shining down, reflected in every carving, reminding us that long before telescopes, long before maps, there were hands that pressed into stone the very shape of the universe. The Chachapoya cloud tombs, high in the northern Andes of Peru, where clouds drift like white rivers through deep valleys and jagged cliffs rise in silent defiance of time, there rests a mystery few ever encounter face to face. The people who once ruled these heights, the Chachapoya, known in later chronicles as the warriors of the clouds, have left behind a secret not in golden temples or vast cities, but in fragile hidden shrines carved into the bones of the mountains themselves. They are the cloud tombs, impossible sarcophagi perched high upon vertical cliffs, where the dead still look out across the land of living mist. The story of these tombs is one of height and secrecy, of devotion to ancestors, of a culture that thrived in obscurity and then was swallowed by the greater tides of history. To understand these strange and haunting remains, one must imagine the landscape as it truly is, a world between earth and sky, where everything seems balanced on edges, where rivers carve valleys so deep that sunlight lingers differently, where the earth feels more alive because it has never been tamed. It is in this kind of world that the Chachapoya placed their dead, not underground, as so many other peoples did, but high above, resting in silence and watching, like guardians, as centuries turned to dust below. Archaeologists who first stumbled upon the cliffside sarcophagi were stunned not only by their precarious locations, but also by their artistry. Some were taller than a man, shaped in human likeness, made of clay, stone, and cane, then painted with red ochre designs. Others were chambers tucked inside mountain cavities, adorned with bones and offerings. From a distance, these tombs looked less like burial places and more like sentinels, watching with hollow eyes across valleys and into eternity. The Spanish chroniclers of the 16th century, who encountered remnants of the Chachapoya people, were equally mystified. They described them as fair-skinned, tall, and skilled in both war and architecture. But more than anything, they remembered their strange, haunting burial places that clung to cliffsides where no man could reach without danger. Why did the Chachapoya go to such impossible lengths to bury their dead? The answer is not fully known. Some suggest it was spiritual geography, a belief that placing the dead closer to the clouds brought them nearer to the gods. Others think it was protection, keeping the remains far from predators, raiders, or desecration. Perhaps it was both, a practical choice turned sacred by generations of ritual. Imagine, if you will, the creation of a single sarcophagus. The living climb treacherous cliffs with ropes of woven fiber, carrying clay, reeds, and paint. They fashion a tall, rounded figure, sometimes with painted faces, sometimes with animal symbols. Within, the bones of revered ancestors are laid to rest. Around them are placed tokens, ceramics, textiles, food offerings for the afterlife. Once sealed, the sarcophagus becomes not only a tomb but a spiritual effigy, a presence in the landscape. From below it seems alive, almost as though it gazes down upon the world, a permanent reminder of lineage and memory. Centuries later, when explorers and villagers rediscovered some of these tombs, they found many of them broken by earthquakes, weather, or looters. Skulls and bones spilled out, sometimes intact, sometimes scattered by time. Yet even in ruin, the figures retained a strange solemnity. A broken sarcophagus still looked like a guardian, its hollow cavity staring outward. In some places, lines of sarcophagi stood together on narrow ledges, row upon row of silent watchers, like an army of ancestors guarding the valley below. The most famous of these is at Karajaka, where 6 enormous anthropomorphic sarcophagi remain balanced on a cliff ledge, more than 10 meters above the ground. Each is nearly 3 meters tall, with painted red designs still faintly visible despite centuries of wind and rain. Their faces are elongated, with staring eyes and stern expressions, as if forever judging the passage of time. Beneath them, the valley spreads wide and green, a world still alive with the same clouds that swirled in Chachapoya times. Standing below them, one feels a mixture of awe and unease. It is as though they are still watching, still waiting, their mystery intact. But Karajaka is not the only sight. Hidden throughout the mountains are other tombs, revash, where small painted mausoleums cling to rock walls like miniature houses for the dead. Laguna de los Condores, where hundreds of mummies were discovered inside cliffside chambers, wrapped in textiles and protected by painted symbols, and countless smaller shrines, many still unknown to the outside world, their exact locations whispered only among local villagers. Each discovery adds to the puzzle, painting a picture of a society deeply invested in how it cared for its dead, in how memory and place intertwined. The Chachapoya themselves are something of an enigma. They built settlements on ridges and peaks, preferring height and vantage. Their most famous city, Cuelap, sits atop a mountain at 3,000 meters, its walls towering higher than even some Inca fortresses. Yet the Chachapoya were eventually conquered by the Incas in the 15th century, absorbed into the empire, and later devastated by disease and colonization under the Spanish. Their language was lost, their traditions broken, their identity mostly dissolved into the flow of history. What remains today are ruins, scattered artifacts, and the haunting presence of these cliffside tombs. Standing before them, one feels a tension between fragility and permanence. The sarcophagi are delicate, easily broken by rain or careless hands. Yet they have endured centuries on sheer cliffs, surviving earthquakes and storms. They are vulnerable, yet somehow eternal. It is a reminder that memory itself is fragile, yet cultures often find ways to cling to stone, to endure through ritual, through placement, through sheer will of meaning. The tombs also ask us questions that reach beyond archaeology. What is it about height that fascinates humans? From ziggurats to pyramids, from mountains to skyscrapers, we continually build upward, reaching skyward in both life and death. For the Chachapoya, the cliffs themselves became part of the sacred architecture. Nature was not conquered, but integrated. The mountain wall turned into a temple wall, the sky itself into a roof. Even today, the local people who live near these sites often speak of them with reverence. They do not see them merely as ruins, but as places still alive with presence. In their stories, the ancestors are not gone. They remain in the cliffs, in the sarcophagi, in the clouds that drift endlessly past. To disturb these tombs is seen not only as destruction, but as a disruption of balance, of the silent guardianship that has watched over the valleys for 1,000 years. As you picture them now, rows of tall, painted figures clinging to cliffsides, their hollow eyes fixed outward, clouds drifting past like curtains of white, you may begin to sense the power they hold. They are not only archaeological relics, they are reminders of how humans, across all time, have sought to give meaning to death, to place the dead, not just anywhere but in locations that force the living to look upward, to remember, to wonder. The Chachapoya cloud tombs are whispers from a people nearly forgotten, yet their presence is undeniable. The warriors of the clouds may no longer march across the mountains, but their ancestors still keep watch, still gaze out from their impossible ledges. And perhaps, if you listen closely to the silence of the Andes, to the breath of clouds moving between stone cliffs, you might feel that they are still there, not just as bones in clay, but as guardians of memory, suspended forever between earth and sky. The Royston Cave. Beneath the unassuming streets of Royston, a quiet market town in Hertfordshire, England, there lies a hidden world that feels like something out of legend rather than history. At first glance, Royston seems ordinary, a town of shops, pubs, and stone churches, much like any other. Yet underfoot, carved into the chalk bedrock, there is a chamber that has stirred imaginations for centuries. It is called the Royston Cave, and unlike anything else in Britain, it is filled from floor to ceiling with strange carvings, religious figures, mythical symbols, and enigmatic markings that seem to whisper secrets long since buried. The cave was not rediscovered until 1742, when a worker digging holes in the town's butter market stumbled across something unexpected. He had been preparing to erect a bench post for the market, but when his spade struck hollow ground, he uncovered the mouth of a shaft. Looking down into the dark space, the men of the town peered at something that looked like a narrow well. A rope was lowered, and when one of them descended, he found himself inside a chamber about 20 feet below street level. By the flickering light of a lantern, he realized that the walls were covered in carvings, human figures, animals, crosses, and scenes of unfamiliar stories. At first, no one knew what to make of it. The townspeople had no record of a cave existing there. Royston had been a coaching stop along the Great North Road since medieval times, but never had there been mention of an underground shrine. And so, for centuries now, historians, archaeologists, and curious visitors have all asked the same questions. Who carved the Royston Cave? Why was it made? And what purpose did it serve? The chamber itself is roughly circular, about 17 feet in diameter and 25 feet deep, cut into the soft chalk beneath the town. The floor is uneven, with a raised platform along part of the wall, suggesting it may once have been used for ceremonial purposes. But the most striking feature is not the shape of the cave, it is the carvings. Every surface is filled with them, some deeply cut, others faint and weathered, as though centuries of damp chalk have worn away their detail. At first glance, many appear to be religious. One of the clearest depictions is of Saint Catherine of Alexandria, identifiable by the spiked wheel beside her, which refers to her martyrdom on the breaking wheel. Another carving is thought to represent Saint Lawrence, who was executed by being roasted alive on a gridiron. There are also figures of knights, one of which holds a sword and shield, and another that may depict Saint Christopher carrying the Christ child across a river, but there are more ambiguous images as well. A figure of a woman, possibly the Virgin Mary, holds a child, though the style is unusual, almost crude, with features exaggerated in ways not typical of medieval church art. A bearded man may be intended as Christ, yet his face is worn and the proportions are strange. Nearby there are animals, including what some have identified as a horse or a lion, but their outlines are difficult to interpret. And then there are symbols, crosses of various forms, circles, stars, and even what some say are representations of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. One of the most curious aspects of the cave is how its carvings mix Christian and non-Christian imagery. While saints and biblical figures dominate, there are also elements that feel older, perhaps even pre-Christian. Some have suggested that the cave may have been repurposed, used first in one era, then reinterpreted in another. The chalk walls do not provide an easy means of dating the carvings. No wood, charcoal, or organic material was left behind that could be carbon dated. And so speculation has filled the gaps. Among the most persistent theories is that the cave was connected to the Knights Templar. The Templars were a military and religious order founded during the Crusades in the early 12th century, sworn to protect Christian pilgrims traveling to the Holy Land. Over time they became enormously powerful, with lands, fortresses, and influence stretching across Europe. They were known for their secrecy, their rituals, and their use of underground chambers. Some believe that the Royston Cave may have been one of their meeting places, perhaps a chapel where they performed initiations or held secret gatherings away from prying eyes. The argument for this connection rests partly on the cave's location. Royston sits at the crossroads of two ancient routes, the Icknield Way, which was used since prehistoric times, and Ermine Street, the old Roman road running north from London. Such crossroads were often significant sites. Moreover, the Templars are known to have had holdings in the region. In nearby Baldock, they had a preceptory, a sort of headquarters for their activities. If Royston Cave was indeed part of their network, it would not be surprising. Supporters of the Templar theory also point to the imagery. One carving shows two figures on horseback, which resembles the Templar seal, a symbol often interpreted as representing the brotherhood and humility of the order. Another shows what may be the Holy Sepulchre, a site of particular importance to the Templars, who had once guarded the Temple of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. Yet there are problems with this theory. For one, when the Templars were suppressed in 1307, many of their sites were recorded, seized, or destroyed. Royston Cave, however, appears in no documents. Its rediscovery in the 18th century was met with genuine surprise, suggesting that knowledge of it had long since vanished. Furthermore, the carvings themselves do not appear to match the artistic style of the 12th or 13th centuries. Some look more like the work of the 14th or 15th centuries, raising the possibility that the cave postdates the Templars entirely. Other theories have emerged over the years. Some have suggested that the cave was a hermitage, used by a solitary monk for prayer and meditation. Hermits often carved out such spaces in remote or unusual places, and the mixture of religious carvings could reflect a personal devotion rather than organized worship. The raised platform might have served as an altar, while niches in the wall could have held candles or sacred objects. Another possibility is that the cave was associated with the Augustinian priory that once stood in Royston. Founded in the 12th century, the priory was a significant religious institution in the town until the dissolution of the monasteries under Henry VIII. The cave might have been used as a private chapel, a place of retreat, or even as a penitential cell where wrongdoers were confined and made to reflect in darkness. Some have even gone further back, proposing that the cave may have pre-Christian origins. The crossroads where Royston sits was important long before the medieval period. If the cave began as a pagan site, later recarved by Christians, this could explain its mixture of symbols. However, without hard evidence, such claims remain speculative. What is certain is that the cave is unique. No other chamber like it exists in Britain, a hidden, circular room filled with mysterious carvings, lying undisturbed beneath a busy town for centuries. When it was rediscovered, it had been sealed off, its shaft covered by the butter market. It is possible that this closure preserved it, keeping the carvings relatively intact despite the damp and the passage of time. Today, visitors can descend into the Royston Cave through a narrow stairway cut from the street above. The chamber is dimly lit, with soft lamps illuminating the carvings that once were seen only by flickering candles. As the eye adjusts to the shadows, the figures emerge slowly from the chalk, as though alive. It is easy to imagine how powerful the place must have felt to those who once used it, whether knights, monks, or hermits. Standing in that underground circle, one senses both closeness and mystery. The carvings are not polished, not refined like the stonework of a great cathedral. Instead, they are rough, almost childlike in some places, yet deeply intentional. Whoever made them cared enough to fill every surface, as if trying to surround themselves entirely with meaning, with symbols of protection, devotion, and power. The Royston Cave has never yielded all its secrets. It remains one of those rare places where history blurs with legend, where theories abound but certainty is absent. Was it a Templar chapel, a hermit's retreat, a pagan shrine transformed into a Christian one? Perhaps it was all of these at different times, layered with meaning across centuries. And so, beneath the streets of a quiet English town, a hidden chamber continues to whisper. It whispers of devotion and secrecy, of faith and fear, of power and mystery. And though its carvings grow fainter with each passing year, their message endures, not one of answers, but of questions. Questions that remind us that the past is never fully uncovered, only glimpsed, in shadows, in carvings, in the silent chalk walls of a cave. The Shugborough inscription. In the rolling Staffordshire countryside of England, nestled within the tranquil grounds of Shugborough Hall, lies one of the most peculiar enigmas of European history. It does not rise in grandeur like the pyramids of Egypt, nor spread out like the lost cities of South America. Instead, its mystery is carved into a modest stone relief, a pastoral scene, a monument that one could easily overlook while strolling through manicured gardens. Yet upon closer inspection, its quiet face conceals one of the most baffling coded inscriptions ever etched into stone. It is called the Shepherd's Monument. At first glance, it is an unassuming memorial, an 18th century relief that depicts a pastoral image inspired by Nicolas Poussin's famous painting, Et in Arcadia Ego. In the artwork, shepherds gather around a tomb in the countryside, running their fingers along the carved words, Et in Arcadia Ego, often translated as Even in Arcadia I exist, a poetic reminder of death's inevitability, even in a land of peace and beauty. But what sets the Shugborough Monument apart is not merely its reinterpretation of the famous painting, nor its Baroque craftsmanship. Beneath the sculpted scene, in plain view but shrouded in mystery, lies a sequence of 10 letters, O-U, O-S, V-A-V-V, and then below them, D-M. To the untrained eye, it seems almost nonsensical, a random scattering of letters. Yet for centuries, scholars, cryptographers, priests, and even secret societies have puzzled over this curious arrangement. What do the letters mean? Who carved them? Why would a noble family embed such an enigmatic code in the heart of their estate? The monument was commissioned around 1748 by Thomas Anson, a wealthy member of Parliament and brother of the famed Admiral George Anson, who circumnavigated the globe. Some say Thomas Anson himself was deeply interested in the mysteries of antiquity, secret knowledge, and esoteric philosophy. Others suggest he was simply an aesthete, imitating the grand tastes of Europe's intellectual elite. But woven into the marble is something deeper than aesthetic choice. The inscription resists interpretation, defies explanation, and whispers of secrets deliberately hidden. Over the centuries, countless theories have emerged. Some claim the letters encode a Latin phrase, perhaps linked to biblical scripture, perhaps referencing Poussin's art, or perhaps serving as a memento mori. Others suggest it is a cipher related to the Knights Templar, the medieval order of warrior monks who vanished in a storm of persecution, but left behind legends of buried treasure and sacred relics. The connection to the Templars arises in part because of Poussin's painting itself. An Arcadia ego was rumored to hold secret symbolism, hinting at hidden knowledge passed through Renaissance art. It was even tied, centuries later, to the controversial and speculative tales surrounding Rennes-le-Château in France, a village that has spawned countless theories of lost treasure, hidden bloodlines, and Templar guardianship of sacred relics. Could the Shugborough monument be England's echo of the same riddle? The 10 letters, OU, OS, VA, VVDM, have resisted even the greatest minds. In the Second World War, Allied cryptographers who worked at Bletchley Park to break the German Enigma code were asked to test their skills on the Shugborough inscription. They succeeded in unlocking Nazi ciphers, but Shugborough remained closed to them. Even with the most sophisticated tools of their time, they could not make sense of the letters. Some interpretations lean toward religion. The DM at the bottom, for example, may stand for Dis Manibus, a common Roman epitaph meaning dedicated to the shades of the dead. If so, the entire inscription could be a funerary dedication, a hidden Latin phrase compressed into initials, intended only for the initiated to understand. Others believe the letters conceal a personal code, perhaps the initials of lovers, family members, or companions, whose identities are lost to time. Some even suggest that the inscription is less a universal riddle and more a private message, one meant to be understood only by a very small circle within the Anson family. Yet, as with many great mysteries, the absence of clarity invites ever more expansive speculation. In the 20th and 21st centuries, theories multiplied. Some researchers claim the code is linked to Rosicrucianism, the esoteric brotherhood said to guard hidden wisdom. Others connect it to Masonic traditions, pointing to the Ansons' likely ties to Freemasonry, a society steeped in symbolism, allegory, and encoded meaning. The boldest theories tie the monument directly to the fabled Holy Grail. In this telling, the letters are part of a cryptic treasure map, one of many obscure signs pointing to the resting place of Christianity's most legendary relic. To some, Shugborough is not just a pastoral estate, it is a node in a web of secret locations spread across Europe, each guarding fragments of a larger hidden truth. What adds to the intrigue is that the Shugborough monument was deliberately modeled after Poussin's painting. Nicolas Poussin himself was rumored to have been involved in secret societies, and some even claim that he encoded hidden messages within his art. That a wealthy English gentleman of the 18th century would commission a carved version of this specific painting, then add a cipher of his own, seems more than coincidence. Even the physicality of the monument adds mystery. The shepherds and tomb are faithfully rendered, but certain details differ from Poussin's original painting. In the sculpture, the figures are reversed, as though seen in a mirror. Subtle changes invite suspicion that the artist or patron intended more than simple homage. Was this reversal deliberate, a symbolic inversion hinting at hidden truths? Or was it simply an artistic choice, soon to be blown out of proportion by centuries of speculation? For visitors to Shugborough today, the monument sits serenely in the gardens. Birds sing, leaves rustle in the Staffordshire wind, and the letters remain as sharp and clear as when they were carved centuries ago. Tourists pause to snap photographs, historians scribble notes, and codebreakers, professional and amateur alike, scribble endless attempts at solutions. The inscription stares back, unyielding, as if amused by human attempts to decipher it. Yet, despite all the speculation, the mystery holds. Perhaps it was always meant to. Perhaps Thomas Anson, or whoever commissioned the cipher, intended the inscription not to be solved but to spark curiosity, to draw generations of minds into the great riddle of mortality, art, and hidden truth. The Shugborough inscription is more than letters carved in stone. It is a mirror of human longing for secrets, for meaning beyond the surface. It whispers across centuries that knowledge may exist outside the bounds of time, that the past may conceal treasures deeper than gold, and that sometimes the greatest mysteries are those we are not meant to solve but to endlessly seek. And so the 10 letters remain, OU, OS, VAVVDM, a puzzle unsolved, an invitation eternal. a stone whisper in the English countryside that has ensnared the curious for more than 250 years. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the past. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to our channel, give this video a like, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now. Until next time, sleep well, and keep wondering about the secrets still buried beneath our world.